Welcome to the first ever OneWrestling.com shoot tape with the one and only Tod Gordon, sitting in with myself, Dave Scherer, Bob Ryder over here. Say hello, Bob.
Hello, Bob.
We're going to sit here with Tod Gordon. We're going to talk about the 10-year arc of his career in the professional wrestling business, the high points, the low points, the beginning points, the end points. No better place to start than the beginning. The year is 1989.
1989, I was still sitting in the second row at the Philadelphia Civic Center, watching Halloween Havoc, just like everybody else. I was a fan just like anybody else, and during that 10-year arc, I went from being one of the guys, one of the bleacher bums, one of the fans, to starting my own company, to making it the third biggest company in America, to retiring from the sport of wrestling. Where do you want to start?
I want to start in 1989. You're sitting out in the crowd. How did you go from being someone who sat in the crowd to being a promoter?
Got to meet Joel Goodhart, who was promoting shows back then. He's the one who got me the tickets, in fact, for the Halloween Havoc show. Probably the last show I ever attended as a fan.
That's back when he was doing wrestling radio on WIP.
Wrestling radio on WIP. Got to know Joel. I did a little advertising on WIP. He started, he saw money, he saw dollars advertising. The next thing you know, I was sitting in front row at center at the Civic Center instead of waiting until Monday to find out.
Your first real taste into the pro wrestling business.
Yeah, right. And Joel ran with the company, and I did some work with him. I got him involved with my charity, and got him his first show at McGonigal Hall, which is the temple. And we did a show for the Variety Club. At the time, I was on the board of directors. Joel did the show, and from there he started running with that, and I became his ring announcer on and off, and a silent investor in the back of the company, until he slowly but surely started letting his ego get in the way.
Of course, that company was the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance.
TWA, yep. And
it was a precursor to ECW in a lot of ways.
People say that only because it was hardcore wrestling.
Right.
But it couldn't be a precursor to ECW because it was a 4 show a year promotion.
Right.
When you're running 4 shows a year, you can't put a storyline or an angle, and ECW was all about storylines and angles, and never about just putting on just a match.
But what Joel did at the time no one else was doing was he was bringing in top flight workers to work.
Yes, he brought in every independent name on the circuit. And every one of them worked them for as much money as they possibly could, and of course, he was paying $1,000 to this one and $1,000 to that one, and loading up his 4 shows with 10 and 20 and 30 names, where he just couldn't help but put himself under, but he couldn't say no to anybody. He let his ego get in the way, and like his goal in life was to have his picture in a Japanese magazine next to Taji Yajimoto or somebody, and so he flew Owen Hart and a Japanese wrestler,
Takayuki Izuka,
for a match, and that match alone cost him $8,000 on a show where he wasn't going to bring in 10. That was one of 20 matches, and I knew then this was the wrong guy to be in business with, because he was about ready to go out of business real soon.
And you were putting the money up then?
No, just a small portion of theirs. I think on 10%, something like that. And I guess Joel's and my split really came when he brought Bob Ortiz, who's a current ECW ring announcer, and he kind of conned them into giving him money when he knew the company was going under.
Conned Bob.
Yes, he did.
And for those who don't know, Bob Ortiz, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet anyway.
And so is his wife Lex. And he did something that I thought was very unethical, taking money from somebody when he knew he was going under. And sure enough, a couple weeks later, still sold tickets to a show he knew was never going to happen. Got all the money he could out of all the fans he could. Took off with money, and that was in Joel Goodhart.
I remember his last show on WIP, on the radio. He came on somber-toned and talked about how it was over, blah, blah, blah.
But meanwhile, he sold tickets up till the day before that show, and he knew that show was never going to happen. Mm-hmm. He had never paid the rent for the Civic Center, never put the deposit down. They kept taking the money, and the fans had no recourse.
And they never got their money back, I know that.
They didn't. A little bit they got back was from the bond he had at the state, which was, I think, $10,000, which didn't cover half what he had sold.
At that time, when you were running with Joel Goodhart, a name probably came up that we'll talk about a little bit later on in this tape, and at quite great length, Mr. Dennis Carluzzo.
It will give you a whole tape on himself with Dennis Carluzzo. I have plenty to say about Dennis Carluzzo.
You think?
Yeah. A little bit controversial, but I got a lot to say, and I'm going to say it all today.
And of course, we'll talk about ECW. We'll talk about everything pretty much everybody wants to know. We'll talk about how Tod came and
I'll tell you all the stories. Anything you want to know, tell you the shoots, unless it's part of a legal document that I'm not allowed to discuss, which has something to do with my relationship with Paul, but other than that, anything you want to ask, I'll answer. Started in '89, like I said, Joel went out of business, I guess, early '91. And I was approached by a couple of the wrestlers and Bob Ortiz in the very beginning of '92, asking me if I would go out and get a promoter's license to keep the quote-unquote bar shows running once a month. Well, I got to tell you, since the time I was 5 years old, I was a professional wrestling fan. I lived and died it. you couldn't get me away from the set on a Saturday. You couldn't get my family to take me on a trip on a Saturday because I had to stay home at 1 o'clock to watch Channel 29. I said WWF and Bruno Sammartino and Killer Kowalski and George the Animal Steele. And I mean, it's like I grew up on it. I lived it. I died it. And we only got the one promotion up here until later on when you could put an antenna on your UHF and you could pick up Florida Championship Wrestling at 1 a.m. and I'd be sneaking up in my bedroom.
I remember those days well, yeah.
I mean, there's Gordon slowly. I kept trying to read, to read the graphics, and yeah, I just always loved it, and always never considered that I could be a part of it.
You had the sickness, is how I look at it. Yeah. Like everyone in this room
does. In the room, and everyone in the audience, and everyone who's an ECW fan or a pro wrestling fan, period. Yeah, it gets under your blood, it gets in your blood. Once it's in there, it'll never come out.
That is the truth.
So they approached me. They asked me if I'd go out and get a license because they couldn't come up with the money together to.
And this was Bob Ortiz?
Bob Ortiz and a couple other people. His name's one of them was Larry Winters, who used to do some booking for Joel. And I said, okay, I did it. And we started running shows at the sports bar. So I came up with the name Eastern Championship Wrestling because we were hoping that if it ever did expand beyond just running sports bar shows, that we could run Delaware and Jersey and New York, make it an East Coast thing. That was like our big goal, someday to be able to actually run Delaware, New Jersey, and New York, not only just the one show at the sports bar. And we started running the monthly sports bar shows, and then we maybe added a venue here and there, a couple of children's homes and not homes, children's facilities,
right. Like the Seashore House, stuff
like that. And then someone approached us about doing a pilot for a sports channel, which was dying.
Who was the talent that was with the company back then? Of course, your best friend.
Well, my best friend, yes, the Sandman. Actually, he was not on my first show.
There's a good story about that, too.
That's right. When I called the guy at the bar and told him I wanted to run shows at Mike Schmidt Sports Bar, he said, no problem, you can run them as long as this guy named the Sandman isn't a part of it. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, oh, you got thrown out of here, we cursed out a waitress, he got drunk, he was in a bar fight, he beat up half the bar, we threw him out, he's not welcome in this place again. Okay, so we're going to run without the Sandman. Then I started getting phone calls from this guy named the Sandman saying, hey, yo, you can't leave me off these shows. Oh, my God, what are you doing to me?
At that time, you weren't even friendly yet.
Weren't even friendly yet. Making a long story short, I really tried to play the go-between. I got him to come down and apologize to the waitress and apologize to the manager. The manager finally allowed him, quote-unquote, back into the thing. And from that day on, we became best friends, and that's 92. 6 years later, we're still best friends.
And he was one of the talents back then. He would come around with the surfboard and his white
in the wetsuit, that's right. And who else was there? Was Johnny Hotbody and Tony Stetson and JT Smith and Donnie Allen, who was still around today. Also one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet in the history of the business. That guy was 250 pounds and had the size. He'd be a superstar because he has the heart and the will, and he's one of the nicest human beings in the history of the business.
Yeah, guys back then, manager. It's funny when you think back to guys like Hunter Q. Robbins. And
we brought in Hunter Q. Robbins for our very first show. In fact, Larry's the one who brought him up to me, and I came up with the idea of a tag team with hoods we called the Super Destroyers. They came out to the music from Halloween, and they started to get over a little bit, and what we started doing was getting over a little bit. And everybody else at the time was doing cartoon stuff. It was when it was the ultimate in cartoon stuff, not just like cartoon stuff. It was like bad cartoon
Papa Shango.
Papa Shango making the Ultimate Warrior throw up by putting a spell on him. And I said, God, this is not what I grew up on. What I grew up on was Bulldog Brower with the Popeye arms. And this guy bleeding and superstar Billy Graham crawling to get out of the cage with blood dripping off of him. I mean, that to me was wrestling. What I was watching now was a disgrace. And I guess anybody who was a fan always knew what they liked and didn't like growing up. So when you were watching something, they'd go to a dusty finish at the end of the show and, 2 minutes to the hour, and they go, oh, we're out of time, folks. I said, that sucks. I would never do that if I was running a wrestling company or something else would happen. This guy's going to unmask it. The mask versus mask, and he pulls it off and there's another mask under there. And I go, that sucks! If I was running a wrestling company, I would never do that. What a rip-off to the fans. It always pissed me off. Always said, once we got started, I said, I'm going to run this federation like I'm running for me. Like I'm sitting in the front row, what I want to see, how I'd want to see it. And that was my philosophy. I was going to run it from a fan's perspective, instead of from a quote-unquote corporate perspective where we were going to just try to make money.
So you were running bar shows back then, started branching out doing spot shows here and there?
Spot shows.
Who had the book then?
I did all the booking back then. We had some pretty good angles back then, actually. And then we got, like I said, an offer from Sports Channel, come up with a pilot. So I did a pilot for them, and they gave us the opportunity to go ahead and move forward. Now I'm thinking now they're looking for 52 weeks of television, and I was still running my own business, a jewelry store in Philadelphia. So how am I going to put together 52 weeks of television? So I came in touch with Eddie Gilbert, and I hired Eddie to be the booker and to put together the TV show because he had experience doing it down in Memphis. And now my goal had changed from just being able to run a couple spot shows here and there to actually having my own Memphis territory. I was going to make Philadelphia, New Jersey, Memphis. I wanted to have a Saturday show live every Saturday like they were doing down there. That was the big goal. I would love to be able to do that. We'll do a live event every Saturday. That'll be the TV show they'll see that week, and then maybe we can do one live event off of the TV show. And that was the goal. We were going to be our own territory. I remember sitting with Eddie Gilbert saying, wow, do you think we'll ever get a column? You know, like all the other guys have column, WWF, WCW, everybody had a column, NWA, you know, do you think we'll ever get like a column like that?
In Pro Wrestling Illustrated or something?
Wherever, in the Torch and this. Now, everybody would talk about each federation and the Observer and this, actually. And sure enough, you know, we grew, and we like became the Fans Federation. What happened was it was overwhelming to me. People started to like get so impassioned in what we were doing because they hated so much what everybody else was doing that it was like, we love this. I mean, with a passion, we love it. We cannot wait. You know, we'll buy tickets for 12 shows right now in a row. As much as I loved wrestling, I would go to see a match. I wanted to see Bruno against Billy Graham. But if Bruno was going to be working against Stan Stasiak for the 30th time, you couldn't pay me to come. But these people didn't care what the matches were. It was the product they were in love with. And that takes us even further when we go to the ECW arena when they started yelling ECW that first night. And the chills that Paul and I got up going up and down our arms and our spine. And people yelling for the product, not for any one wrestler. They were yelling, yeah, we love what you're doing. You're giving us what we want. You're giving us a winner. You're giving us a loser every match. You're not ending every match with a DQ or a count out, which is, you know, just a bogus way of getting out of a match if someone doesn't have to do a job. You're giving us stipulations, and if you give us a stipulation to a match, the stipulations are carried out. If you say someone's going to get caned 10 times, they're going to get caned 10 times. If you say they're going to get unmasked, they're going to get unmasked. If you say they're going to be, as we go back to one of our earlier shows, we said there's going to be a cat fight where someone gets stripped. Someone got stripped. And I got my first ever arrest. The first letter I ever got from Greg Sorg, Commissioner of the State of Pennsylvania, putting my license on probation. That's right. He put our license on probation because he heard there was a naked woman in the ECW arena, topless in the middle of the ring. But that's what we promised
And
him.
she sure was. I was there.
And we delivered it, and that was super Summer Sizzler spectacular.
ECW Arena, the first show ever.
That's right. It was the first show ever there.
What did it feel like to you? First off, it was like reaching a dream in a lot of ways because the TV show you started running, was it February?
No, we started running the Federation February '92. We probably started running the TV show almost a year later.
Yeah, so it was February '93, right?
Right around there.
And basically, the first show was built up to the Super Summer Sizzler.
That's right.
Main event up.
Originally, what it was every show was all local wrestlers, and I'd bring in one name, like an Ivan Koloff, a Jimmy Snuka, Don Morocco. And back to the things that I liked, when it was Snuka against Morocco jumping off the top of the cage. And these were the guys that I brought in. But I talked to them first before I ever had them in and said, look, the purpose of being here is not just to pick up your paycheck. It's to help me build these guys and make these guys. That was always my philosophy. Bringing a superstar in who's willing to help someone else have credibility, therefore people want to see the match. And sure enough, I worked with people who were professional and had been around long enough that they would help get my guys over. And Snuka came in, and Koloff came in, and Morocco came in, and they all did jobs for the local guys, and that helped elevate the local guys. And that got us a springboard. Now we got TV, we need some more names. So we sat down, we said, we want to make it hardcore, and at the time Cactus was under contract with WCW, which was then called the NWA. And Terry Funk and Cactus were the only two names that ever came to mind. So of course we went after Terry Funk, and he was, God bless Terry Funk, and he still see him sitting there the night, like I said, of our very first ever TV show that we taped. And I was so proud.
Cabrini Fieldhouse?
Cabrini Fieldhouse. And I was so proud here. We were at the end of the show, and I was standing under the mic with Terry Funk. We did our first show ever, and Terry said, yeah, we really sucked tonight, but don't worry, we're going to get better. I went, really sucked tonight? Did he just say that? I mean, the guy just like buried my show. I can't believe he just did that. But he said, Todd, get the hell out of this business. You're crazy. You're crazy to put your money into this business. Get the hell out while you can. And sure enough, we didn't, and Terry was a mainstay for the first 4 or 5 years, and I really give him almost a lion's share of the credit for helping build the Federation, because he was so magnanimous in helping putting people over and getting people over.
In the locker room.
In the locker room, he was a good influence. He helped make Public Enemy. He helped make Shane Douglas. He helped make a lot of the guys in that locker room the stars that they are today, and helped them reach the level they have because of his generosity.
And he definitely gave back when he was here.
Yes, he did.
So at that time...
So before we got there, Eddie came into my book. Stop interrupting me.
Hey, it's my gimmick.
Yes, that was page 11. You can't read it without a magnifying glass.
Most of my readers aren't as old as you are, so they don't have that problem.
So Eddie Gilbert was my booker. He came in. We brought in Funk, and little by little, I started to have some problems with Eddie that were work-related. And we had a falling out because he was under the impression he was very nervous. He had brought in Paul Lee as like an assistant to him. He brought in Paul Lee to help run the interviews and to be a manager and the on-camera presence. And Paul Lee was getting ready to start up with Jim Crockett, who was going to go into this major new federation,
WWN.
whatever it was going to be. Jim Crockett was going to be the next Jim Crockett. And he decided he was going to build a company that was going to compete with the other two. And he was allowing Paul to kind of like, do this until he was ready to go. With me always having the knowledge that Paul was going to leave.
I believe their first taping was in February of '94, I think it was.
I have no clue on date.
I think it was.
I'm lucky I can tell you today's date. So Paulie, as I said, worked with Eddie and Eddie and I had a falling out one day because he was under the impression that I was going to try to go off and be a part of Jim Crockett's group and be like a smaller, like one of his, like the old NWA, where I'd be a territory for Jim Crockett and work for Jim Crockett. My goal was never to work for anybody. My goal was just to put on a show that I, as a fan, would have liked, no matter what the expense would have taken. And yeah, for the first show, the main event, I brought in Stan Hansen, Abdullah the Butcher. It was supposed to be Eddie Gilbert, and who was the fourth person in the ring?
Terry Funk.
I thought it was Terry Funk.
Terry Funk. Eddie quit, and I replaced him with Kevin Sullivan. And then Eddie called me and said he changed his mind, and let's let bygones be bygones, and let's get this match going. I put a lot into it and building it. And I said, I've already replaced you, and I kind of flipped him a little bit because Kevin was someone he didn't care for very much. And I brought Kevin in, and Kevin, we gave the fans what they wanted to see. We gave him Abby, we gave him Stan Hansen, who nobody had in this area, let alone on TV in this area in years. And we started building, hardcore wrestling again. And the reaction we were getting, like I said, it wasn't just one of like, hey, that was a great show. These people were like saying, thank you, thank you. I can't believe you did, thank you. I know you lost money. There's only 400 people here. You had a payroll that had to, obviously you lost money on this show. Thank you. These people were genuinely grateful. And you can't help but be moved by that. I mean, you see that you're doing something that can stir that kind of passion in people. I knew we had something. I didn't know what we had, but I knew we had something. And like I said, that first night, I couldn't even tell you what night it was.
I believe it was June 18th, 1993.
I'm saying that I did ECW. The first night when it was the end of a show, we were going through the 7 or 8 match show, the show ended and the whole building erupted into a cheer of ECW, ECW. And I said, oh my God, listen to the passion these people have. People don't leave the WWF going, WWF, and then maybe going to Stone Cold, but they weren't going WWF or WCW. These people had a passion. They were saying, we're with you. Whatever it's going to take, let's make this thing happen. They wanted to keep it there. They wanted to keep it just in Philadelphia. And at the time, I didn't have too much of a problem with that. I mean, my goal then wasn't, hey, we're going to be a pay-per-view company. Because, there was us and Smoky Mountain were the two, quote-unquote, and Memphis were the 3 next levels of companies as we got started. And then I used to sit there and pick up the sheets and listen to how Jim Cornette said we were trash and we were garbage because we tried to do something that nobody else did. We tried to push the envelope. Because we tried to do the same kind of show that everybody else was doing. We couldn't do it as well. We didn't have the money. We didn't have the resources. We weren't in arenas. We were going to empty buildings where I had to call up and order chairs and get lights and get sound and get all this stuff brought in. I mean, it wasn't like these things were ready-made for us. We were just taking empty halls like the bingo hall and making it into an arena. And that took a lot of money. It took a lot of sacrifice. It took a lot of time and effort. And then we would just sit there listening and tell us how ECW's going out of business. Everybody kept telling us, ECW's going down. You're going out of business, going out of business, going out of business. Smoky Mountain will live forever. But it didn't turn out that way, obviously. Smoky Mountain didn't live forever. And Jim Cornette put his tail between his legs and kind of ran. And he had this hard on for Paulie from back in their WCW days. And that was his, I guess, way of getting back by always making the comments trying to put ECW down. And he had a good friend named Dave Meltzer who writes a sheet, and we'll talk about him too, who was his buddy. So the two of them together in their own kind of way, were always trying to put the little knock to ECW, always trying to give, and always trying to make sure that we were looked at as nothing but like a whatever, a Philadelphia joke, a little renegade thing, a little nothing thing.
A wannabe.
Talk a little bit more about Eddie Gilbert and the transition between Eddie and Paul, because a lot of people at some of the tribute shows have said that Eddie Gilbert made ECW. He was responsible for the success, and there's heat still to this day between a lot of people about that whole situation.
Well, and there's one other thing that goes with what these people say. They say that Paulie pulled the rug out from under Eddie and stole his job.
Well, that is a bold-faced lie.
Right.
As I said, Paul,
well, you would know. You were there.
Paul was getting ready to go work for Jim Crockett. The night that Eddie and I parted ways, and there were other reasons, as I said, that were work-related just between Eddie and I wouldn't tell out of school. I wouldn't talk about someone who's passed away what the reasons were, but the reasons why I thought Eddie couldn't continue in that job and in that capacity. And when I replaced him in that match, and Paul was there, Paul wasn't there as taking his job. Paul and Jim Crockett were in town that weekend trying to woo me to become their quote-unquote Philadelphia promoter. At that weekend, I turned him down. I said, Jim, I don't want to be your weekend promoter. I mean, I don't want to be your Philly promoter. I don't want to be somebody who works for you. I just want to do my own thing. And I love doing my own thing, and I love creating stories. I love being able to put on a product that if I was a fan, I would enjoy.
Now, let's face it, at the time, you were paying for that product out of your pocket.
Oh, yeah, and losing my shirt at the time. I mean, believe me, at the first couple of years, there was a lot of money being invested, a lot of money being lost. And I used to pick up a sheet, and there'd be Bruce Mitchell or Mark Madden talking about the mark with money. I guess the only guy that mark with money was losing his shirt just because he was such a mark for the boys. But I guess, as they say, living well is the best revenge. And every penny I invested in the wrestling business, I got back and then some. So Mark, Bruce.
My statement to that is, even if it was a case where you were spending money and you never got it back, what would be so wrong with a guy who loves pro wrestling, that has the money to spend to put on the shows he wants to see to do it? Why has that got to be a negative thing?
It was the shows that I thought the fans wanted to see too. It wasn't just me. I mean, if I wanted to see the show, I could go pay and buy a ticket to see the show.
But I mean, at the basis level, even if you were putting on a show that no one wanted to see, but you wanted to see it yourself, and you could afford to do it, why is that a negative?
It's only negative if you're jealous and can't do it yourself.
Well, that's pretty much what I always thought, to be honest with you.
I mean, I guess these guys say, hey, goddamn, how this guy who's a nobody sitting in the second row, all of a sudden he's putting on shows. How come I'm not putting on shows? I used to be in the second row because I took a chance. I had the balls to take the chance, and I took the chance. And again, I was losing money, and it was nerve-wracking because it started to snowball with television. And the more stations we got on, the more the expenses grew and everything happened. But let me go back again. At Eddie's last night, we let him come in. He came in. He really was done, and I still gave him a payday the last night to come in just for what we had been through together. And we had a friendship. I let him come in and do a run at the end of the match.
And the relationship at that point was he worked for you. He didn't invest any money in the promotion.
Oh, no, he was strictly a paid
employee.
Yeah, strictly a paid employee, as Paul was too. I mean, they were all paid employees at the time. And Eddie's last night, he came in and I let him do the run-in so that he and Terry could start a little angle that he wanted to run with down in Texas or in Japan with Terry. And I did him a favor and gave him the payday for it. And he wanted the job back. I said, I didn't think we could work together. But at that time, it was my impression that Paul was only a few months away from leaving for good. And pardon me, we're taking Public Enemy and Dreamer and Taz, which was the four guys he brought in with him, to New York to work for Jim Crockett. There was never any intent on Paul and I having a long-term relationship. But sometimes funny things happen. And Paul slowly and I realized that we had a camaraderie and a likeness, whether it be from our back
kinship, I think is a good.
Well, it's our background, the way we were raised, and we became like family. And slowly but surely, he realized he'd rather work for me or for me than for Jim Crockett. I mean, that was really the bottom line. I mean, we used to laugh about when he'd put on one of his videos on the TV. He'd throw up one of the rock videos, and we used to say Jim Crockett was probably sitting at home saying, Martha, listen, they got that African music on again. Come check it out. And we used to kind of like joke about it, but I didn't know half the music Paul was using. But I'll tell you what, I knew we were onto something. Like I said, I knew we had tapped something. And all these people from the Titan, all these people from Atlanta said, oh, we'd never watch a show. We don't watch it. That's what they used to say back then. You'd be seeing almost identical things slowly but surely starting to happen in their products also. A lot of that came when Kevin Sullivan left, who took a lot of our stuff and just rehashed it and redid it with WCW.
A lot of your people too.
Oh, yes, he did. I mean, Kevin will tell you that he did not take a lot of our people, but, you know, what can I tell you? You know, all of a sudden, if we had half the money that either Vince or Turner had, I believe we'd have made this promotion #1 within 2 years. That's how hungry people were for what we were giving them. They hadn't seen blood in 5 or 6 years anywhere in any wrestling. They're having steel cage matches and raking each other against the cage without blood.
Makes no
I
sense.
can't watch it. I mean, it's like it turned me off to what was my true love. And if I was going to be turned off to it, I was going to do something about it. And even if nobody saw it, like you said, except me and the 50 people or 100 people or 200 people watching saw it, that was good enough for me. I felt like I did the right thing. Because, oh, you shouldn't be in this business. You're too honest to be in this business. You're respectable. This is not a business for you. This is a dog-eat-dog. It's all wolves. That's bogus. Some of the nicest human beings you ever want to meet are in this business. Yeah, there's scumbags in it. There's scumbags in every business. There's also some class, and really classy, good people. So Paul and I, like I said, we became like family. I mean, to this day, you know, I speak to his parents all the time. You know, my mother's at his house. We're like family. People don't realize that. But
No, they really don't realize that.
Paul came to Philadelphia every week to do the TV show after Eddie left for about a year and a half. 2.5 hour ride down. Joey Styles would come down, you know, for at least one of those days, and they do 2 or 3 days, you know, in the studio without a break, without sleeping, straight through. And for 18 months, he did it without getting paid. Nobody knows that. Every one of those wrestlers got paid. Paulie never got paid. I said, Paul, I can't deal with it. I mean, come on. I said, how can I not pay you? You're doing a TV show for me every week. You're working your ass off. How do I not pay you? So when you start to make money, do whatever you think is right. Well, even before we started to make money, I did what I thought was right, and I gave him half my company. So any guy who puts in 18 months and doesn't ask me for a penny, wasn't asking me for reimbursements for hotels and gas, to me, that's a man. I mean, that's a guy that's telling me something that he really wanted this to succeed, and he was willing to do whatever it took to make it succeed. That was my attitude. When I want, you know, when I put myself into something, I throw my whole self into it.
So that was sometime in 1995 around there that...
Dave, don't ask me dates. I'm terrible with dates. But anyway, I gifted Paul half the company and made him my partner.
Let's go back to 94 for a second.
Okay, sure.
At the time Paul took over running the book,
Right.
It was around September of 93.
And at that
Ultra
time,
Clash.
in all fairness, we really booked together. For about the first year and a half to 2 years of Paul in the book, we really did it together. Did he not have the lion's share of the creativity? Absolutely. Could I do a finish like he could? No way. But I could create an angle. You know, I could create a storyline. I could create a character. You know, I knew how to get elicit the reaction I wanted from the people in the audience, because I was always able to put myself in their position and know what would have popped me and what I would have pissed on as a fan. And knowing that, to that knowledge and his knowledge, the two of us clicked like a team as far as I'm concerned, like no other. I think that 94-95 period of ECW was the greatest 2 years of any federation, period.
It was a great time.
You know, I mean, I think if you go back and look over those 24 months of tapes, that was the best damn television show on, to me, in the history of professional wrestling.
Okay, so it's 93, and Paul had what a lot of people call his MTV style of booking.
Right.
And hit the hip-hop and everything. And one of his greatest strengths...
Stop doing that with the camera. You're driving me crazy. You're giving me a headache. And he said, yeah, but you're an old man because I'm not putting the show on for you. We're putting it on for people who know what song I'm playing. And I'm saying, well, don't you have any Beach Boys or
But he had his finger on the pulse.
He had
of
his
the
finger
fans.
on the pulse. Paul's the man who said to me, and it's a true story, he said, Todd, said, in about 1 year, the word extreme is going to be the in word. It's going to be on MTV. It's going to be on ESPN. Everything's going to be extreme. Let's change the name now. Let's make our company Extreme Championship Wrestling. Let's copyright it. Let's get that name in before anybody else ever uses it. I said, why? I mean, it works. Oh God, Eastern is doing great. Eastern Championship Wrestling, it works. He said, trust me. I trusted him. He was absolutely right. A year later, everything was extreme. But he had his finger on it a year before anybody else did.
So at that time, like I said, he had his style, and it was hit and miss in the beginning.
Yeah.
Then, on February in 1994, 60-minute match. Terry Funk, Shane Douglas, Sabu. The night the line was crossed. Let me tell you, 60-minute three-way draw we had in that match. The people were so into it, and I was out in the crowd. I know, I was one of the 400 or whatever was there. This is a true story. I swear to God, strike me dead if I'm lying. 58 minutes into the match, Bob Ortiz, 2 minutes remaining. We're all standing on chairs. Everybody's stoked, right? Guy standing next to me with his girlfriend. It was so, everyone was standing on chairs. They were so close. It was so hot. The actual heat got hot in the building. And it was February.
That building always got hot.
Guy's girlfriend passes out, falls off the chair, and hits the floor. I look over. I see her falling down right next to me. I look to the guy. I said, your girlfriend just fell down. Aren't you going to do anything about it? He goes, ah, fuck her. There's only 2 minutes left in the match. I'm not missing the finish. True story. Strike me dead if I'm lying. But
that's the passion I'm talking about.
And that night,
and that passion nobody else had ever reached in people. I had never gotten that passion brought out of me, and I was a fan 30 years at that point, more. No one had ever gotten that kind of passion. We had hit a nerve. We did something where the people were like saying, this is what we want to see. So I knew we had something. Even though I was losing money, I knew we had something. And we call say it would start out as a cult movement, turn into a groundswell movement that just kind of snowballed and mushroomed, never thinking that we were going to take the thing all the way up to pay-per-view. But then as we started to grow, those ideas started to come to our mind as we realized, and the internet and the computers,
which we're going to get into in a minute, though.
All of that was so tremendously helpful to the company.
Well, that night, it was really the genesis of the company.
That was possibly the one. Yeah, up until that point, that was the greatest show we had ever done. We left that night. We went back where we were going to shoot the angle with Shane Douglas and Terry Funk, where he throws the belt in Funk's face, and we walked into the hotel lobby. There were about 300 people in the Hilton Hotel lobby. Paul and I just come walking and dumped them. We're exhausted, and everybody's standing up and giving us a standing ovation in the lobby of the hotel. We were like freaked at first, like, whoa, what the hell is this? And we just said, my God, we've hit a nerve here. And then now, how do we make this nerve turn into a profit? I don't know. But whatever it is, we have hit a nerve. We've got a thing that's really working together. And we worked very, very well together. I mean, we were a hell of a team. I handled all the business operations. He handled all the, the booking and the creative part. And we bounced a lot of the creative part back and forth. We fine-tuned things together, and we worked very, very well together. But people don't know what goes into trying to put together an empty building and make it into an arena where people can come in and watch a wrestling show. Besides getting the airline tickets and getting the reservations, making sure everybody's ready for this hotel and that hotel, it's getting the chairs, it's getting the lights, it's getting the camera people, it's getting the sound people. I mean, there's so much involved in putting on a show that no one has any idea how much work it is. But my kids were starting to feel like it little by little, and I love my children, they're my heart, and I can't live without my kids. And little by little, I found myself, even when I was home, I'm on the phone till like 11, 12 o'clock every night. So the days started becoming longer. We started growing. I'm just going to turn to why I ended up having to retire. And, it just became an all-consuming 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week job.
So at that point, it was really the genesis of ECW. Paul took a lot of guys, and you took a lot of guys that at that time weren't given a chance anywhere else, and made them into very good characters, which of course one by one got picked off by WWF and the WCW.
As I said, if we'd have had their money to start, half of them, quarter of their money, and just so we could have contracted the people they stole from us, I believe ECW would be the #1 rated product in the country today. No doubt in my mind. Because they never knew what to do with anybody. No one would offer Dean Malenko, Chris Benoit jobs, or Eddie Guerrero if their lives depended on it. So they saw how to use them properly. Nobody wanted any of these people till they saw, that's what you do with them. I get it. These people were clueless who were running the other companies at that time. No clue at all. They thought, go for the kids, go for the 6-year-olds, and 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds. And our idea was, no, go for the parents of the fans of the WWF. That was our goal.
But as we found out, by going for the parents, you keep the kids too.
Well, we didn't want little kids because, in all honesty, I didn't let my kids watch the show.
Well,
our show was like an R-rated show. It was a TNA Howard Stern kind, and we wanted Howard Stern's audience. We pushed the envelope. We were the very first people to ever have the guts to go out there and break kayfabe. Have someone go out there and call Sandman Jim Fullington in the middle of an angle. And we go, what? He just called him Jim Fullington. I mean, we went out there, we had Cactus Jack say, I don't even know where Truth or Consequences, New Mexico is. I mean, we had people go out there and shoot. Well, people never shot wrestling before. I mean, everything's a work. You got to work the fan, got to work and get the money work. No. We said, let's try it a different way. Let's be real. Let's do it the way, if we were sitting in that front row, the way we'd want to see it done. Don't tell us this guy's from Truth or Consequences in New Mexico and he's got, well, he's not. You know, he came out and everybody just started shooting. And Shane started doing shoot promos, talking about Ric Flair. And we used to sit there with our mouths hanging open as we do them. But we say, you know what? You feel it. You want to say it. Say it. Somebody has something they wanted to say. Say it. If we have to bleep you, we'll bleep you. But say what's on your mind. Shoot. And we started the shoot interview. And from that, and that's what really turned people on. They never knew what they were going to say on the show next. Mm-hmm. Was it going to be funny? Threw humor in. Was it going to be, you know, bloody? Who knew? Was it going to be somebody else, you know, shooting on somebody, you know, like I said, who ever heard of somebody going out and even acknowledging another company, other than going out and calling Ric Flair a pussy and everything else that Shane Douglas called him for a year and a half. And that was our whole concept. When we first started Eastern Championship Wrestling, I came up with a slogan. The slogan was ECW. It's not for everyone. That was my slogan. And I remember early on, before Eddie left, sitting in a hotel room with Eddie Gilbert and Paulie Dangerously, Paul Heyman. And they'll tell you, Paulie can tell you the story, and they said, "You are crazy. That's the stupidest slogan I ever heard of. It's negative advertising. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong." I said, "Don't tell me I'm wrong." I said, "I'm telling you this is a great slogan. People are going to say it's not for everyone. Well, then who's it for? What do they mean it's not for everyone? What is it? Why isn't it for me? Who is it for?" And that slogan caught on to the point where, to this day, that's still the way it's recognized, ECW. It's not for everyone. And I was right. And they both came back at different times later and said, "Sorry, it's a great slogan,
and it's
we were wrong."
still one of the top selling t-shirts.
That's right. I guess the market didn't know anything about wrestling, had a little bit more knowledge than people thought.
Well, maybe you got that when you were carrying Ric Flair's bags. Remember that story?
Yes, I do.
Why don't you address that real quick? Because
this is a stupid-ass thing. They're so ludicrous. I had a meeting one day with Kevin Sullivan because he was coming into, or maybe after Kevin had just left. And I went in and he said, "I have to meet Flair first, come with me." So I go in, I meet him at the hotel, sit down at lunch at a restaurant with Ric Flair and Kevin Sullivan. Ric Flair, and in 3 minutes, just torched Paulie. "He's a piece of shit, he's a liar, your partner is this." And there's nothing. Kevin's going, "Well, Rick, can't we do something together? I'm trying to help Todd. He's a friend of mine. Can't we, maybe they can have some of our guys and we do some talent exchanges?" He was trying to, be a friend, straight up. Not with Paulie Dangerously. And Rick, and I said, "What an asshole this guy is." I said, "This guy's my partner." So this meeting lasted about 3 or 4 minutes, and I left. And then a week later, I read that I was at a pay-per-view carrying Ric Flair's bags into the arena. Or from the day I started my company, I never attended another wrestling show in my life. I mean, I wouldn't even call it dead at somebody else's wrestling show, let alone be carrying somebody's bags in. If I'm going to carry somebody's bags in, I'll carry Bill Alfonso's bags. I'll carry the Sandman, Tommy Rich, Sabu. I'll carry any friend of mine's bags who can't carry his own. Well, I'm not carrying Ric Flair's bags with some mark around my own company. That was what he printed, and that was his big joke. And
who did print that?
Mitchell printed it, and he got it from Madden, who got it from, whatever it was, it was just stupidity. And that was their way of always trying to take their shot to put us down. It was like, the Jim Cornette philosophy of life. Get higher up by knocking somebody else down.
But you know what? You had a different tool at your disposal back then that no one else had used before, that you used at that very time. A lot of people thought the sheets were the way to go, but the sheets might reach 1,000-2,000 people. You had a different idea.
Well, I can't say it was my idea. Did you run the computers?
Yeah, I'm talking about the internet.
I was actually approached by somebody. A guy came in my office one day and says, "Hi,
who was that?
I'm Tom," and he hands me a business card, and I figured he was going to tell me his name, and I take the card and it says, "Mr. ECW." I said, "Mr. ECW? Oh, hi, I'm Todd, Mr. San Francisco 49ers. I thought I was Mr. ECW. I don't know, I'm putting the money out. I guess maybe I was wrong. Maybe he was Mr. ECW. But anyway, he said, "I'm Mr. ECW, and I'm into this computer, and there's et cetera, et cetera." And Ed Zahn was there at the time, and he said, "There's a guy named Bob Ryder, who if I'd have known then, I never would have gotten involved with."
I hear you. I know that feeling.
He said, "There's a guy named Bob Ryder who's, real into this wrestling thing on the computers, and he wants you to do an interview. Would you do a live interview where people could ask you questions?" I put myself out there where people could ask me anything. I said, "I don't know about that," because I had been a pretty private person. I kind of like the idea of keeping the wrestling business the way it should have been, in a closed circle. I mean, there's one thing to break kayfabe, it's another thing to do it as a shoot, as part of an angle, or part of a storyline, but it's a whole nother thing to do it as part of taking down the business. And that was not something I was interested in doing. I said, but hey, if it'll draw more people, make more people aware of our tape and what we're doing, I'll do it. And sure enough, Bob Ryder, from whatever city he was in at the time, was typing away, and I was sitting in some hotel room or hotel lobby, and there was Tom asking me questions, and I was answering them. And from that point on, we realized that we had a tool here, because from people hearing about ECW, no one knew how to get tapes of the shows. And somebody started writing up about our shows. It certainly wasn't Dave Meltzer, but on the internet, I believe it was you.
Might have been.
Might have been, but other people who were there, they would write a recap of the show. And people would start saying, how do you get these shows? And through that computer, people started buying our tapes. And while we're losing all this money in talent and payroll and TV costs, the only thing that was keeping us alive was tape sales. Mm-hmm. And we were selling tapes. We couldn't believe it. I mean, we were getting orders from Japan. So we're going, Japan? How the hell do they know about us in Japan? But our tape sales, they were unbelievable. We were this little company running these just a few little shows in the Philadelphia area, like, you know, whatever it was, a couple times a month, and bang, people were buying our tapes from all over the country. That startled us. And then we realized what a great tool the internet and the computers could be. Today, of course, WWF uses it, WCW uses it, everybody used it. But back then, no one used it until we gave them access.
Well, you're right now with this tape, you're talking to computer users, because this tape will be sold at OneWrestling.com.
And I think OneWrestling.com is one of the greatest things that ever happened to professional wrestling. I mean, instead of having to wait 7 days, like when I was a kid, you see, I couldn't go to the shows because I was too little. My dad wouldn't take me because he said, it's fake. I can't stand watching Tod Tanaka throw that salt in his eyes. I can't stand you watch that fake crap. I said, it's not fake. It's not. It's real salt. He's blind. Idiot. My father doesn't know anything. You're not telling me about Tod Tanaka. To this day, my father still only knows one name, Tod Tanaka. Yeah, I had my own wrestling company for 5 years. He only knows Tod Tanaka. But anyway, you can see he's very involved in the business. Where the hell were we?
You were talking about computers and how great our website was, which we agree with, by the way.
Yeah, so it used to be that each, they'd say, for 4 weeks leading up to the matches at the old arena or the Spectrum, it was going to be Bruno against so-and-so. I couldn't wait till the following Saturday, and you always have to wait till after the second match for the first set of interviews to find out who's still champ, because they would never announce during the matches what happened, at the Spectrum. Right. You would wait to see, is there going to be a rematch? Yes, Bruno's going to fight again. Oh, he's still got the title. All right, thank God Bruno didn't lose the title,
And anyone who's our age knows exactly what you're talking about.
You had to wait. And I couldn't wait till the next, the week after the main shows. Well, you guys basically, that's what the Sheets kind of did. They made people not have to wait months. And then you guys took it to the next level, which is, the 90s, the millennium. You guys put it on a daily basis where people can find out what's happening, not only the next day, but you guys actually made it possible for them to find what's happening as it happens. If this man right here, Bob Ryder, could come into my building and say to me, what do you think about the idea of me actually doing play-by-play on the computer of your show? I went, who would want that? He said, you'd be shocked how many people would want that. I said, they'd want to sit there and read for 3 hours what's happening? He said, trust me. I looked at that face, and even though I didn't trust that face, I took a shot anyway. And Bob Ryder's one, I said, we tried to hook up a phone line, which only took us about 30, 40 attempts before we got the building back right. But once we finally got an actual phone line that worked, that didn't go to Chickie's Bar and Grill down the street, we had Bob to get this thing going, and sure enough, ECW was off and running. And it's one of the things I think it's a shame that we don't get the credit for, is the fact that none of this wrestling boom I can't say it wouldn't have happened, but we were the ones who started it, and we all started that one day, one guy approaching me, and Bob was one of them, and we went off and ran with it, and it became what it is today. And now every company uses it and sells merchandise off of it.
Big time.
That's right, it makes lots of money off of it, but it wouldn't have happened unless we just said first, yes, well, I'll do it. Ask me the question, Bob, go for it. And that's how that all started.
Okay, so we're back in 1994, and the company started to take off.
And now we're drawing 300-400 people to a show. We are skyrocketing now. Now instead of losing 10,000 a night, we're losing 5,000 a night.
At that time, no matter how much money you were losing, everybody came to know that the ECW arena was the one show you had to see.
That's right. And we're starting this reputation. It used to be Madison Square Garden, the mecca of pro wrestling. All of a sudden, it was the ECW arena. The mecca. I mean, we gave it the name. It's Viking Hall. It's a mummers band clubhouse that has a bingo hall underneath it, and we stuck a sign on there, ECW Arena. And to me, I think that right up at Carkin Hall is the most famous arena today in professional wrestling.
And it never ceases to amaze me the fact that people will come in, like from out of town or something, they'll look at the building and go, what? And then after the show, they're like, I see what the charm is now.
Yeah, just one day I came up with the idea. I just said, let's rename the building the ECW Arena. And we talked about it. I remember Paul or Eddie wanted to make the ECW Dome. Right? I said, no, ECW Arena. Let's make it like an arena, the old
Philly arena.
I want to have people smoking cigars, and I want adults there, and I don't want to put in a kid's product. I want to go and see the kind of stuff that I wanted to see, that Howard Stern's audience wanted to see, and that's who we targeted. And like I said, from there, it just like, off we went running. Man.
So at that time, then it was mid '94, and the NWA was starting to make a comeback, and they wanted you guys became NWA Eastern Championship Wrestling, and they wanted to have a big tournament to decide the new NWA champion.
Well, actually, what it was we thought that we could get more credibility for Eastern by joining the NWA, because at the time WCW was a member of the NWA. There were only 4 or 5 members. It was, Jim Cornette, I think, was a member. Gary Juster from WCW, WCW itself. There was some guy from New Zealand. I mean,
Dennis Carluzo.
I don't know if he was a member back then. Yeah, I guess he
Yes,
was
he
a member
was.
back then. I guess I try to forget about that. But yeah, he was a member probably back then too. But to be a member, all it meant was you gave them $500 and you could use their name.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't.
And you got rights to the champion that you never got.
Well, no, that's not true. There was no champion because at that time WCW abdicated.
Right.
So there was no NWA anymore. So we're the only ones who were using the title and Crockett was going to come back with his NWA basically, and we were the only ones with a TV show. And he contacted me and he said, listen, I want to get my product off the ground down here. You've got Paul, the two of you, be happy together. I understand he's not going to come work for me, but I still want to do something. I want to start my own territory, and all of us can get an NWA champion together. You're the only one who's got TV. Would you do the tournament at your place? You do it for TV.
Well, initially it was supposed to be in Woodbridge, New Jersey, and then that fell through.
No.
That was reported.
He called, that's not true. Jim Crockett made the phone call to me, asked me to do it. Paul and I sat down and discussed it. We said, okay, if that's what you guys want, we're the ones with TV, but we'd have certain things that would be agreed upon in terms of who would win. And we agreed that one of our guys would win and then drop it to Crockett's guy down in Texas, whatever the case may be. Well, the next thing you know, I'm picking up again. I'm getting things in the mail and sheets on the computer saying, Dennis Carluzo said he was never consulted, he was never contacted, he's blocking the whole tournament. And you have to understand, this guy started out the same time I did. I mean, I was running bar shows, he was basically running the same thing. 6 years later, he's still running in front of 200 people, and we're doing 4 pay-per-views a year. So there was always this jealousy and animosity as we grew and grew. But they started making these comments, and he throughout. What I hadn't got to preface this is, as we were growing, before we even got to this point, we had to take him and his fat music guy, Fat Gino, or whatever they call him,
Gino Moore,
out of our parking lot as they were on their hands and knees unscrewing valves on tires of cars, trying to make our fans come out and have flat tires. They were calling up the fire commissioners trying to have us shut down, saying we're overloading the building. They were calling schools and sending tapes of our hardcore stuff, getting shows canceled. So this guy had cost me some money along the way, and he had a major receipt coming.
and now you were in a position to have to work with him.
And then all of a sudden he said, I'm the one who can decide whether this tournament goes. I said, hey, we didn't even want a tournament. Who needed your tournament? This was for you guys. We didn't ask to have a tournament. We didn't need your tournament. We're doing as fine as we are. And then you go and pull this bullshit instead of calling us. You go and sheets, you say this, you say that. Well, forget it then. Making a long story short, if I decided to do the tournament, he wanted Chris Benoit to win the title, who at the time was working independently. I was working for him. And we talked him into the idea of Shane winning the belt. And of course, the rest of that night was history. As he sat there biting his nails and heel going, he's pissing on the belt, man. He's pissing on the belt. He's pissing on the belt. I'm not pissing on the belt. And then this buffoon, after this whole thing's over, still the only person out of 1,500 people in the building doesn't realize that he just got duped. 1,500 people or 1,200, whoever was there that night. Every person walked out of that building going, he just screwed Carluzo. He found out Tuesday night when he watched the show. It took him another 48 hours to realize what he just
He did
happened.
an interview
He did 2 takes. He came out there and he said, Shane Douglas doesn't want to be in there. We'll strip him of the belt. We'll throw ECW out of the NWA, which of course gives our opening to rip down the NWA banner and split into Extreme banner, and we became Extreme Championship Wrestling Inc. Declared ourselves a world title, and we took the NWA world title, made it into our world title. So from that point on, any NWA titles were meaningless, and even today, if they want to call their title a title, it's still meaningless, as far as I'm concerned anyway.
But what went into you and Paul and Shane deciding to screw the NWA, to throw the title down? I mean, for Shane, that was a pretty ballsy move to make at that time.
In all fairness, Shane wasn't part of this big plot. It was, we talked about it, how we were going to handle this, and there was, and I wish I could remember, if I get Paul on the phone, he'd probably tell you right now, there was one final indignity where he did one last thing where we had a show canceled at a high school.
I think it was in South Jersey.
Wherever it was.
It was a Camden County College, maybe.
We had a big
He
show.
sent a tape to the athletic director.
A week before we were willing to work with the guy. And we finally said, you know what? This guy's a piece of shit. How many times are we going to let him mess with our business? This guy's taking money out of our pockets, and he's taking money out of every wrestler's pocket when they get the show canceled. Anything, instead of just worrying about his own company and running his own company, he had this obsession with, don't let ECW grow, keep them down, don't let them grow, because then I look like what I am. And so, of course, that was the final indignity. He got a show canceled on us like 4 or 5 days before the show, and we said, you know what? Screw him. That's enough. We've never done a damn thing to this guy. We don't acknowledge him. We don't talk to him. We don't mess with him. But he does nothing to mess with us. Our receipt was in order. That was his receipt.
Shane Douglas threw down the belt.
We went to Shane with the idea, giving him the option to turn it down. And he kind of loved the idea. I mean, hey, he was one of the ones who missed the payday in Camden. He was one of the ones who missed the payday at another school that Dennis screwed us out of. And it wasn't like Dennis was getting the shows, he just wanted to screw us out of getting the shows. In other words, he just kept messing with our business.
Oh, we have a brief pause. Go get a beverage of your choice.
Hang on, just 1 second.
Pause us.
I will.
Oops, excuse me. Hey, 2 Fonzie ones.
Uh-oh. Tod Gordon is calling Bill Alfonso.
On show day, last. Should I give him on speaker?
Oh, yeah. What's the over-under on how many times he says daddy?
Bet it up, Daddy.
Sir?
Bye, Hans! Did you know I'm doing in the middle of a damn shoot interview right now?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. You're supposed to be in the arena. What are you doing?
I'll be there at 5 o'clock.
Before you say anything, I got you on speaker, just so you know.
You're being taped, Ron.
You're being taped for part of my shoot interview.
What are you going to do for it?
Dave Scherer and, what's your name again? Bob Ryder.
Oh, Bob, hey guys, I'll see you guys tonight. Hey, listen, if you want to take me off, it's okay. If you want to keep me in, it's okay. I talked with Paul, he had like a 20-minute meeting with me last night. He wants me, Van Dam and Sabu to work with these guys tonight to real lightweights and, you know what I mean, no competition.
Yes, who they are.
And with such hard items now, I don't want to have that, man. I want somebody strong, you know what I mean? If we beat somebody weak, that means nothing. We want to stay real strong.
Fonz.
What do I do here?
Fonzie, is it Johnny Smith and Wolf Hawkfield?
What's that?
He wants to know if it's Johnny Smith and Wolf Hawkfield.
I don't know who it is, but he said, give you guys some lightweight competition. They're good, but you know what I mean? I said, no, we want strong guys. We want strong guys.
Fonzie, listen to me. As much experience as you have in this business, you need advice from me at this point like a hole in the head.
No, I don't need advice.
You're as smart as anybody. I would trust any call you would make. Let me just tell you something about Bill Alfonso since he's on the phone right now. I tell people he would give me the shirt off his back. Well, guess what? The shirt I'm wearing today, he gave me off his back yesterday. What shirt did you give me yesterday?
Long sleeve black ECW.
I rest my case. He took it off at my office because I said, God damn it, all I have is short sleeve shirts. I have one long sleeve ECW shirt. He took it off and gave me the shirt off his back. And that's one of the greatest guys in wrestling. Him and the Sandman, my two best friends in the sport. Right behind him, Too Cold Scorpio, but Bill Alfonso, one of the greatest guys you'll ever meet in professional wrestling, one of the most intelligent people about the business. You don't need my help. You handle Paul your way, you know how to handle him.
Okay, Daddy.
You got it. Bet it up.
Have a good interview.
You got it. Late.
Alright, thanks, Todd.
Only one daddy, I'm surprised, I really am.
Sorry about that.
That's all right, it's an added bonus for all you viewers out there in Ryder land.
Still running things from behind the scenes.
No, I'm not running anything. No, I have friends that call me for advice. Hey, I got a lot of loyalty. I mean, I built up loyalty because I was loyal to the guys who worked for me. I mean, when I did the NWA angle, the Public Enemy came back with me. Brian Lee came back with me. Kimona, Missy, I mean, the Pitbull, Stevie. I mean, they didn't have to do the angle.
We're going to get to that later.
Because in doing so, they knew they were going to have heat, you know, where maybe cut their noses off to spite their faces with ECW, but they were still willing to do it anyway because they were loyal friends. And Johnny Grunge and Ted Petty, you know, Public Enemy, two of my closest friends still live. I mean, I don't go a month without talking to Johnny. I don't go a month without talking to Scorpio. I still am close with Raven. I'm still close with Dean Malenko, who's down in WCW. I've developed some tremendous friendships. But Sandman and Fonzie, they're my two best friends because the four of us, Scorpio, Fonzie, me, and Sandman, traveled together at every show. I guess for about a 2-year run.
The posse.
The posse, we call ourselves the posse. And I can't tell you one story from any of our experiences together because we're all happily married now and we want to stay that way. And all I'll tell you is we had a great 2-year run together.
Well, I'd really love to hear those stories sometime.
But you won't.
That's another take.
Yeah, too hot for OneWrestling.com. The outtakes. All right, we were talking about the NWA tournament, and it's a good spot to leave Dennis Carluzzo now because we'll get back to him later, and I know you have a lot to say about that.
Yes, I do.
From 1994 on, the company started to take off.
We started expanding markets. We went on TV in Florida. We went on TV in New York. And slowly but surely went on these, not accesses, but like these things that were on satellite dishes like American television, which would be picked up by 40 or 50 different little stations, UHF stations
right,
around the country.
America One.
And then the tape sales started going, boom! And all of a sudden now, you know, a little of the money that we had lost, and believe me, it got to a point where we were saying, we keep losing money. There's only so much to go around, guys, you know? And thank God that kept, like I said, you know, the fans kept us alive. The fans made this federation more so than any other federation. Because when Vince lost money for 10 years, the Turner lost money for 10 years, they were still going to be in business the 11th year. If we'd have lost money for 10 years, we wouldn't have been in business 10 years. So I really do credit the fans, and that's what we've always called it, the Fans Federation. That's why I still proudly still wear ECW. That's where my loyalty will always be. It will always be my legacy in the sport of wrestling. I hope to God someday it is #1. I hope we're doing 12 pay-per-views a year. And I'll always be proud of the people that work there. I'll always be grateful to the people that work there, and the people who started and were there with me, and the people that continue to work there now. I respect them more than you'll ever know.
Okay, I know you do, because I've heard it more than once.
That's right, because we're friends, and I tell you this, and it's the truth. It's a shoot interview, and I'm shooting with you.
Then we move into 1995, and you had the Malenkos and the Guerreros, and WCW came along and took them, and then you discovered the Lucha guys and the Rey Mysterios and the Juventudes, and
we did the lesbian angle, and we did push the envelope on television.
And the Sandman with the caning Tommy Dreamer angle, and
how about the cigarette? Well, you should have seen the fight Paul and I had over the cigarette. It took me 3 months of fighting with him before he finally agreed with me to let him go out to that ring with that cigarette. That cigarette was my idea. The beer was Paul's. But we started first, it was the cigarette. And we fought. He said, you can't do that. You cannot put someone on television with a cigarette. I said, it's not for everyone. Okay, so once in a while, you're right. So finally he gave in, and Sammy went out with a cigarette, and he went on to become the most popular star in the company.
And it probably still is, really, even though he's not there anymore.
But, you know, then again, it wasn't just a cigarette that made him the most popular star. I mean, here was Paul, who was so creative that made him a black and white character in an all-color show. When you see this movie Pleasantville, hell, Paul did it 5 years ago. And this guy he's literally a creative genius, and he's always ahead of the game. I mean, he takes the most of what he has to work with and gets so much out of it. I give him all the credit in the world.
There are some that think that since you left the company and don't do what you did in the past, that he's a little overwhelmed right now, and he can't let his creative juices flow the way they used to.
Well, I would assume that, yes, when I left the company, that all of a sudden there was a lot of responsibility that I was taking on myself, whether it was dealing with the people from Japan. Well, I mean, at that point we were international, so I was his character. I was Paulie Danger's guy. I mean, I had a phone in my ear 24 hours a day. I couldn't stand it. It was unbelievable. It was non-stop work. Wasn't seeing my kids now at all, because now we're starting to travel. We're going to Boston, we're going to...
And you were working matches with Bill Alfonso at that point?
That's something else, but we'll talk about that if you want. But yeah, we started to get so large that there was so many responsibilities that I had taken on that I had overwhelmed myself. And when I did leave the company, a lot of that fell to Paul. It's damn near impossible just to do his job or just to do mine, let him try to do both. So if there was a lull before a rise, that would be because of the fact that, sure, you had to be overwhelmed. How can you be creative when you're trying to deal with the pay-per-view companies? You're dealing with this bullshit guy and this music guy and this sound. I mean, that stuff he never had to deal with before, and it became, his workload, which in itself was more than most human beings could stand, triple. So if you're thinking creativity or whatever went down, I'd say with good reason.
What should he do? Who should he bring in? Is there somebody out there that can help him in that?
I'm retired.
Wow. I wouldn't think to bring you back, because I know you are retired.
And happily so. Even though it was reported incorrectly when I did come back and did those 4 shots or 5 shots with Dennis, that I was now coming out of retirement as part of my way back into ECW. But that was only one of about 500 erroneous reports that I read in Dave Meltzer's sheet. Dave Meltzer is possibly the most clueless human being about wrestling I've ever read in my entire life. I don't get his sheet anymore. I don't say it. I wouldn't. If he sent it to me for free, I wouldn't read it. He had a hard-on for ECW from day one because he didn't discover it, like he did Smoky Mountain. Hey, I discovered Smoky Mountain. This is cool, guys. Read about it. But he didn't discover ECW, so he put it down. And he put it down, and then he always, used to try to bury it. And then he started with his erroneous reports, and it was just one. He would give arena recaps that were jokes. He wouldn't even have the right people in the right matches, let alone the right answers, the right finishes. He didn't give a shit, and it showed. And he was just. I just felt that he was very unfair to the company, and that people looked at him as a respected journalist. To me, as a joke. When I pick up a sheet and I read Dave Meltzer say, ECW officials say, well, there's only 2 ECW officials, Paul and I, and neither one of us had talked to him. So who was the ECW official that he was quoting? He was bullshit. I mean, the guy just had a hard on, like I said, and just decided to keep, doing anything he could to try to keep this company because it wasn't his baby. And he didn't want to give it the credibility that everybody else gave it. To him, it was always going to be a little bingo hall nothing. And that's he's very happy with it being. But he would, like I said, he would write stuff like just recently. Tod Gordon's back in the business, and we all knew he would be. Well, no, I wasn't back in the business. I am retired. I am not going back to the business. I am spending my time with my children, which this is their years to grow. 10 years from now, who knows where I'll be. But can I tell you that I have no desire to come back now. The only reason I did, and I guess
let's go right into that then. You came back. You left. Let's go. Why you left ECW first?
I left ECW because now my days have become 25-hour days, and I was at that point where my kids, who again are the most important thing in the world to me, were like, "Who's Daddy?" "Oh yeah, we see him on TV." Well, I didn't want to be the daddy they saw on TV. That wasn't the way I started with them. It wasn't the way I wanted to all of a sudden finish with them. And I lost a good 2-3 years in there of their growing up, and I wasn't willing to let that happen. And I realized that I had to make a decision, either be more hands-off, which I'm not capable of doing, because when I do something, I'm a very hands-on owner. It's just the way I am. I'm a hands-on person. Or either get out, back off, or I had to do something. And since I can't do something halfway, I had to leave.
Okay, well.
And all of a sudden, this whole story came out that there was a mole in the locker room who was trying to destroy the company from within. I mean, that was such a crock of shit.
Yeah, talk about the mole and the WCW story.
I mean, it's so boring, the reality of the story, as opposed to the way it was reported. I feel kind of almost like I'm letting a lot of people down who had this great, angle or story in their mind. But basically, it was a night, Trenton, New Jersey. There were 3 or 4 wrestlers sitting in a room whose names I won't mention. And they were all disgruntled, and they were ready to leave. And I was leaving also, getting ready to, but for different reasons.
By this time you had sold the
Not
company.
because I wanted to, yes, by this time, I already sold my shares to Paul and cut my deal with Paul.
So you were planning to get out of
yes.
the active end anyway?
I had started my plan like almost a year before that, so that by a certain time that I would, yes, be out of wrestling. And there were like only 3 or 4 people, and they were disgruntled, and one of them had said they'd already contacted Atlanta, and 2 or 3 others said, we want to go too, but we're afraid if we make the phone call and they say no, we're going to get fired. And the 2 or 3 people that were involved in this, or 4 people, were people that I was close with. And they said, we're going either way. You know, it was that kind of thing. They just had been fed up. I said, well, I'll tell you what, don't do that. Let me make a phone call for you, see if there is any interest in you. You know, I can at least be, you know, respectful of that. Other people left the company before. You know, when Teddy and Johnny left the company and they were going to go to Vince, they came to me and they said, you know, what do you think about this? What about Kevin Sullivan? Should we try to do this? And they came to me for advice about leaving my company. No hard feelings. They're making X amount of dollars a week, and this guy's offering them this, and they're my friends. I don't care if it's my company. I cared more about them. They were my friends. I wanted to see them do well. So I had no animosity about them leaving. And pretty much, you know, unless it was done the wrong way, we never had any animosity about anybody who ever left the company. So they were ready to do that, and they said, would you make, I said, I'll make the phone call for you so there's no heat on you. And that was a simple phone call, and the extent of it was one phone call, 5-minute conversation. The story then became, there's a mole, an ECW trying to undo the company and trying to like get everybody to leave en masse. No one's trying to get anybody to leave en masse. 95% of the locker room didn't know anything about what was going on. It was simply a phone call to see A, if they were interested, B, the kind of money that would be offered if they were interested. That way, I was the bad guy if it ever came out, as opposed to them being the bad guys. I have broad shoulders, I can take the heat, I was leaving anyway. But all the rest of that with the secret meetings and this whole big plan and back and forth, none of that was true. And, you know, I talked to Paul throughout the entire situation. Wasn't, you know, the parts that I told him didn't tell him, I can't get into, but, you know, obviously when I left, he and I left as friends. And he and I still are friends. And in fact, I can't even say we're friends, I'd say we're family. Like I said, I spoke to his mom 2 days ago. I'll talk to her for half an hour before I can get on the phone with him.
All right, when was the last time you spoke with Paul?
Last time I spoke to Paul was 2 days ago.
Doesn't sound like your enemies.
No, Paul and I are certainly not enemies, no. Far from it. Very far from it.
But that incident is what led to your break.
But that, no.
From your break from wrestling.
Yes, that incident greased the skids where now I could say, I almost took advantage of the situation. I let how this rumor became into a story, and I said, perfect timing. Paul and I already had our separation deal in place. So it wasn't like there was anything that was going to change. So I used that opportunity to say, okay, I was the bad guy. None of these guys were, you know, keep these guys out of it. I was the bad guy. You know, I never spoke on the issue. It's the first time I've ever spoken about it. But boy, Dave certainly had the story, not you. Dave,
I was going to say,
Meltzer certainly had that story. Where he got it from, since it was a 5-minute conversation, God only knows. But he was quoting numbers and figure. I mean, like I said, people take something and they just run with it. They make it up. They make up their rumors. They just make it blow out of proportion. And all it was I just wanted to spend more time with my family. I was happy to finally get to a point where my money that I invested had been returned. I got to see a little profit on that. That's all, you know, I couldn't ask for any more.
You got to live a dream. You
got to live my
pay-per-view.
dream. Got to take a company that started with 100 people in a bar. I put it on a pay-per-view. And by the third pay-per-view, I was going.
Well, in that aftermath, there was an interview in The Torch with Taz.
Yes.
And why don't you give us your feelings on that? Because I don't think you've done that up till now either.
Well, I thought that Taz was out of line during that interview. I thought that he said things that were inappropriate in the fact that I had given him an opportunity to become Taz. It was my dollars and cents that were putting him on television every week. So I thought for him to say anything negative at all was an inappropriate thing for him to do. Whether we were friends, not friends, it wouldn't have mattered if it was Sandman who said it. Whoever would have said it to it for, I'm paying your check and I'm taking care of you and I'm helping you become who you are, then I felt to say anything negative publicly about me, no matter how you felt privately, was inappropriate. After the incident happened, Taz called me up, he apologized. He said, I was wrong, I was, in a way, kind of put up to this and kind of under the impression that there was going to be a bunch of people doing this and I was going to be the first of others, and I was kind of worked into doing something that I didn't want to do, so that he became the fall guy for the quote-unquote anti-Tod Gordon group. And I said, hey, no hard feelings here. It was over, it was done. If I saw Taz today, I'd shake his hand, give him a hug, say, how the hell are you, brother?
Okay, so that's an interesting end to that story that a lot of people probably wouldn't expect as well.
That's right.
So then it was 1997, you're out of the business for a while, and you decide to come back to wrestling with Dennis Carluzza. How the hell did that happen? How did you come back to wrestling with Dennis Coralluzzo?
Well, I'll tell you the truth. It wasn't I decided to come back to wrestling. In the 6 months or year that I was out, I'll be honest, while I didn't get into it for the ego, I got into it, like I said, because I wanted to do it the right way, and because the way it caught on, and I felt like I was doing something great. You okay time-wise?
20 minutes.
Okay.
Is that enough?
I felt that, as I said, I was ready to retire. I was done. I had no desire to come back to the business. But I felt during the year that I was off, it was amazing to me that never once did I read a letter, a commentary, anything by anybody said, hey, give some credit to the guy who just stepped away from this business and retired, who put his balls into the wall and put mortgaged his house and put every cent he had up.
When you say you haven't read, are you talking specifically about?
I'm not talking about anybody. I'm saying anywhere. There was just no. There wasn't a sign in the arena. Bring back Tod. There wasn't a testimonial, a farewell. Although Paul, I thought, did a nice thing on the TV show. There wasn't a letter written into a sheet. There wasn't a writer from a sheet. And I'm going to exclude you because we have a personal relationship. So therefore, anything you can say is going to be misconstrued as you being quote unquote a shill, which really wasn't true because the number of times you called me up on a Monday and said, "Yo, bro, Saturday night sucked." I'd say, "Sucked? That show was great Saturday. You didn't like this?" You'd say, "No, bro."
And it was more like late Saturday evening, early Sunday morning.
No, yeah. So you were not a shill. You would tell me how you felt. Maybe you didn't go out and bury us in your sheet or on the internet, but you were always honest with me, whether you liked it or disliked it, and I respected that. And that you were one of the only people I got that honesty from. And so if you were to say something nice about me, you'd say, "Well, he's his friend, of course he's going to say something nice." But again, everybody's on the computer today, all the federations, because I went and started the computers. What you're watching on Monday Night Raw and what you're watching on Nitro, you're welcome. Because if I hadn't started ECW, you used to be watching the Ultimate Warrior throw up from a Papa Shango spell. But they saw what we were doing. I said, whoa, people like this. And it's catching on there. And the people who like it are so passionate that WCW went to Florida for a taping and got their mascot to run through the audience going, WCW, WCW, trying to get the audience to do it. And they were going, please, where's Barry Horowitz? Come on, get out of the way. And so they couldn't even get it to happen because it's not something you can make happen. You can't make somebody love your stuff. You can't make somebody have passion. They either do or they don't, and we did. And I thought, geez, I started with nothing. I was sitting in the second row, took a company up to pay-per-view status, and not alone, but certainly spearheaded it. And I felt like there was just not even an acknowledgement of it. It was like I just disappeared and felt the face of the earth. So it bothered me a little bit during the time I was out of the business. And then I get the phone call. One of the pit bulls. What do you think about doing an ECW invasion angle for Dennis Coralluzzo? Well, after I finished laughing.
Now, I want to clarify something here real quick. The Pitbulls called you. Was it their idea or were they asked to call you?
I have no clue.
Okay, because Dennis told me before that he had nothing to do, that you came to him.
Right.
That's why
And his credibility is very good as an honest businessman. That's some of the charities he's ripped off. Anyway. I was contacted by the Pitbulls, would you consider doing this angle? I said, no. I said, if I was going to come back to the business, I'd come back to ECW. I live and die ECW. I had no desire to get back in the business. Just hear what Dennis has to say. I said, okay, hear what Dennis has to say. Dennis calls me up, have this conversation. I'm going to come around and tell you. He said, what would it take for you to come out? I said, Dennis, I wouldn't leave my house for less than $1,500 a night. It's just not worth it to me. I said, to me, to be part of anything that isn't ECW goes against everything I believe in. But Ted DiBiase, everybody's got their prices. For $1,500 a night, hell, I'll show up there. I said, I'll only do a limited number of runs. I said, I'll only do like 6 shows or 8 shows, and you figure out which one you want them to be. I won't be on all your shows because I'm going away from my beautiful new wife. I just recently been married over a year or 2. I said, my kids, I said, I'm not doing that again. I wanted to get back in the business. I'd go to ECW and be back in the business. But for 4 or 6 shots spread out over a couple of months, sure, you cost me enough money over the years. Give me some of it back. And he didn't balk, and he said, you got it.
Well, now he says, of course, he didn't pay.
Right, I understand. But meanwhile, everybody else, as soon as I worked, started calling me up to ask me for dates. And they all offered the same $500, and I said, no, I get $1,500. And call any local promoter, and they'll tell you the same thing. I said, that's the only thing I would come out of the house for. I would have done it for Tommy Fierro, and I've done it for Ed Zahn, or anybody else who called me up. But I wasn't doing it for anything less. So for him to say that is a joke. because you could have got me out of my house for less than that. So I agreed to do it the 4 or 6 shots, but before I agreed, I talked to Paul, called him up on the phone and said, hey, this guy's offering me this kind of money. I said, I don't want to do this. I said, I hate this son of a bitch, you know, and he said, I hate him too. He said, but how do you turn down that kind of money? I said, exactly. And we talked about it, we discussed it. I said, you know, he even gave me lines to help me with my promo the first night. He said, don't forget to say this. I said, all right, here's a real good one for you. Well, yeah, it says, my so-called enemy, Paul, has some of the people thinking in the locker room what a joke that is. He's feeding me lines for my promos to do at the NWA show. So I said, fuck it, you know, I'll do it. You know, for $1,500 a night, I'll do it. But here's the conditions. If I'm going to do it, we're going to do it my way. One,
This was agreed upon before you
ever said.
Okay, so this
one
leads to the end.
Me and all of my guys get paid up front before the show starts. I'll never enter a building of yours until I've been paid. Check, cash, whatever. I want to know that that money's good in my hand before I ever walk in the door. Or I will not walk in the door because I don't trust you. Number 2, I have total creativity in booking over our angle. Because you're clueless or you wouldn't be still enjoying 100 people. So he said, done, done, done. And he went, done, done, done. So I hand-fed him an angle that he had no idea how to promote or how to run with. That could have made money. But number 1, I mean, this is the way this guy promotes. He's got a show across the street from a college. Sam and I show up there the day of the show. It's noon. The show's not till 7 o'clock that night. Across the street from Camden
County College.
I said, who's flyer in the college? Oh, me, we did that last week. I said, no, the show's tonight. Who's over there right now promoting the show? Tell them, hey, across the street, show tonight. Nobody. He advertises on TV. Okay? Tod Gordon and the Renegades or the Hot Stuff International, whatever he's calling it, are going to be at this show. When does he advertise? During a night of the arena show. So anybody who's a ticket-paying buyer...
He advertised on the ECW
show, but he advertised the night of the arena show. So the people who spend their money to go to the shows aren't going to see that show because they're at the ECW arena. This is a promoter. This is why he's still drawing 100 people to a show. This is why he can't make a decision without someone telling him what to do or where to go or how to go. Did the 4 shots, and throughout the whole thing he was very distraught because, hey man, you're being the babyface. They're cheering you. I was supposed to be the babyface. I mean, the whole idea was, I said, Dennis, I'm doing everything I can. I came out and I'm wearing a dead man's jacket and clothing. I'm doing everything I can to get some heel heat here to make you a babyface. But these people hate you so goddamn much. There's nothing I can do to make them like you. I couldn't figure out a way to help these, get them to be a babyface. Finally, 50th anniversary show is a big show. I come up with this great, what I consider to be a great way to help them out. We're going to do a triple turn at the end of the show. We build up a War Games. We have a match where Doug Gilbert lost the match. I would get to pick the stipulations for the NWA 50th. War Games with Dennis and I in the cage. Had a great finish worked out where at the end of the match, Doug was going to turn. It was going to be just Doug, Dennis, and I alone in the cage. Doug was going to turn on Dennis and join Hot Stuff International. Instead, Dennis said, oh my God, then I'm really going to be the heel. I said, nah, listen, hear it out. I said, my 2 most popular people are Stevie and Missy. So what we'll do is we'll have Doug say, no problem, I'm part of Hot Stuff as long as she's not part of the angle. Bam, we close on Missy, take her out. Stevie goes over, are you okay, are you okay? We trash Stevie. Boom, Stevie and Missy are now with Dennis. Dennis can finally be the baby face. I hand-fed him the angle to help him finally make money. It wasn't making money because no one cared about his people. I mean, we were fighting each other, the ECW guys had come to see it. But to see us come in and just beat up his people and take his belts, it was stupid, and he didn't know how to promote it. So, I hand-feed him the angle. Get to the NWA 50th show. I worked the convention. I tried to be all business with the guy. And, he did what he said he was going to do.
Well, you checked into the hotel the Friday night before.
Yes, I did, because I was supposed to do the convention the next day, and I was paid for the convention. I said to him...
You were paid for the convention?
Well, yes, I received a fee for the convention. I wouldn't get into that because other people did not get fees for the convention, and that's not really fair. Okay. I said to him, the idea was the angle was going to end at the Eddie Gilbert Memorial in February, where finally Doug would turn back with his family. I said, and on the final night, I said, here's where we'll end it with Peggy will slap me. That's Eddie's mom. his dad will give me the uppercut, Doug, you'll pile drive me, and you can finally pin me, 1, 2, 3. You'll stand up with all Gilbert family, you're the super baby face, they'll carry me on a stretcher, and there's your angle. So I basically wrote him out a 6-month angle where he could A, make money promoted properly, B, be the baby face that he was marking out to be, and C, get what he wanted. Comes to the 50th anniversary show, stand in the locker room, 15 minutes before the show, Jim Cornette, all of a sudden Mr. NWA. I guess because he couldn't be Mr. Smoky Mountain anymore, he's Mr. Something, so I guess he's Mr. NWA. Of course, you know, it's not that he does an important job doing this. 5 minutes, Mr. Gunn! I mean, that's still an important job that he has there with the WWF. I don't want to diminish that in any way. Basically, he came out and he announces, runs through the matches, and he goes in the final match is a 6-man tag with Todd and Dennis and Missy and Donnie B outside the cage. I'm like, huh? Man, we've gone through this finish 80 times in the last 2 weeks. Went through it Friday night with Dennis and with Howard Brody. Went through everything was all agreed upon.
You were at the convention all day that day?
All day that day. Now it's like, now Dennis is standing outside in the lobby going, or in the hallway saying, oh man, I'm losing my shirt on this angle, I'm losing my shirt. Well, if he was paying me $500 a night, he wouldn't be losing a shirt. So he was losing a shirt because he was overpaying me. But eventually the idea was he could have gotten it back in tape sales if he let the angle run its course. But, you know, Dennis, as soon as he started losing money the first night, like I said, you got to balls to be a promoter in this business because you're going to lose before you're going to win. I mean, ask Ted Turner. He lost for 30 years or 20 years before he made money. Ask Vince McMahon the number of years he lost money before he made money. You got to be willing to have the guts to lose money before you're going to make money. He went 3 shows, lost money, and right away, you know, he was ready to jump off the Tallahassee Bridge. And he tells me 5 minutes before the show, oh, we really got to end it tonight, I'm losing my shirt. I said, Dennis, you want to end the angle tonight, that's fine. I said, but you can't go out there and give him a 6-man tag. I told the same thing to Cornette, when you promised him a War Games. That's your main event. It's the last match. You're going to bring the cage down and then just throw a 6-man tag out there. I've seen 40 matches, half of which were the drizzling shits to start with. I said, you can't do that. It's ripping them off. Oh, it's okay. You know, that's what we're going to do. I said, Dennis, if you don't give him the War Games, I said, I'll do the job for you tonight. I don't care. End the angle tonight. Let's go with the new finish. I'll do the job. Bang, it's over. But at least put an end to the story. You know, don't make it like Baby Doll holding the pictures up of Dusty Rhodes and no one ever found out what the hell was in those pictures. You know, give him a conclusion. I'll do the job. Big deal. And doing a job never hurt anybody. You know, anybody thinks that doesn't have a clue about the business. Anyway, so I said, carry me out. Beat me up. I don't care. Let this be the end, but give him the War Games. No, because apparently Cornette talked him into not being in the ring because he would be such an embarrassment in the ring.
I believe the quote he gave was...
Well, we'll get into Cornette's quotes in just a minute because I got a lot to say about Jimmy first.
Let me switch that.
Okay.
So if you want to...
No problem.
We ready to switch?
Yeah, there's only a couple minutes.
Ready? We're going to pick right up with the finish that never happened.
Here we are that night. Now, I said to myself, okay, Dennis lied to me, swerved me. He's telling me tonight's going to be the last night. I can live with that, even though it was a swerve. And he told me up until that, if he knew that before 5 minutes before the bell time, he knew that was going to be my last night. He should have said, let's wrap the angle up tonight and come up with a new finish. Instead of doing that and having the guts to face me man to man, anyway, until everybody's around, he said, oh, I can't afford it anymore. I want to finish it tonight. I said, okay. Should have told me that before 5 minutes before bell time, but I'll accept it. I'll put you over wherever you want. No, it's got to be a 6-man tag. I said, straight up, I said, I am not going to have the last night I'm going to be in wrestling. And I expected that to be my last night in wrestling. B, where I'm part of ripping off the fans. My whole legacy's been that I've delivered all I promised. My whole legacy, I'd like to believe to everybody that ever watched anything I ever had anything to do with was, hey, yeah, he cared about the fans. He really did give a shit. And I do give a shit, and I always did give a shit. And if people didn't like something, then hey, we tried to change it. We went on TV and said, yeah, Tully Blanchard against Shane Douglas, that was the drizzling shits. What a horrible, we screwed up. We had Public Enemy come out and make a joke about me. I don't mind a bit more wrong. But at least I'm not going to lie. We never lied to the fans. We never ripped them off. We never screwed them. You know, and this guy's saying, your last night in wrestling be you screwing the fans. And I said, instead, no, screw you. I said, there's not $2,500 wouldn't be worth it. Nothing to do with the money. Keep your $1,500. I took off the jacket. I said, Dougie, here's Eddie's jacket back. I love you, bro. I said, but I am not going to be a part of this ripoff. And that's just what it is, a ripoff. And I walked out the door without my money, but with my principles. I always take principles over money anytime.
So you left that night, and
then 2 weeks later,
well, the next day I wrote a story on the internet.
yes.
Basically, my story read very much like what you said there. Dennis himself admitted that he swerved you and that you had creative control. And the only thing he really disputed in my story was the fact that I mentioned the $1,500 figure.
I don't blame him. He's got a locker room of guys making $100 to $200.
Well, that was one of the...
I'll tell you what, I don't know that as honest as I am, if I was in that position, I wouldn't have felt compelled to do the same thing. Because if I'm Tod Gilbert going out there and cutting my head and falling down and busting my ass and going through tables or Stevie Richards, and I'm getting $300, and there's this guy just standing there in a jacket going like this and making $1,500, I'd be damn pissed. So as a promoter, I understand him saying that. But if it was less than that, I'd have worked for other promoters asking me for money, and I have no desire to be. Like I said, I've had offers from at least 5, 6 different people during that run and since that run. But that wasn't what it was about. It was about being able to get my message out during that
Which
promo.
you did in the shoot interview.
Which I tried to let people know, say, hey, remember me? Having a little fucking credit for something that I did. I said, yeah, I mean, I'm not God, but give me a little credit for having something to do with being the reincarnation of professional wrestling. The fact that Steve Austin's doing this on television is because we went and let him go on TV and started saying the word fuck, and even though we bleeped it out, or we did this, or we pushed the envelope. And we kept pushing and pushing it, which made everybody else able to do what they're able to do. And no credit. Okay, so that's one of the reasons. The other reason was the money.
So the
Plain and simple.
next day, I detailed the story on
You
One
detail the
Wrestling
story.
Time.
And the next thing I see is this thing, and I don't have it here, and because I don't have my reading glasses, I can't read squat out of here. But Jim Cornette's response. And God, I wish I could have my glasses, because there's a couple things in here I'd like to respond to.
Well, I could read through it if you want to, and you can just stop
Well,
me.
the things, basically the things that stuck out in my mind from him was A, screw this part out of ECW ham and egg. I should just get my glasses.
Okay.
Todd's only used to.
Okay. This was probably way too sensible. Okay, well, basically what he said, I better go from the beginning on
He
this.
tried to tell me that my angle at the end of the show
Would leave a
a
turd
turd in the ring. Would be like laying a turd in the ring. I said, a triple turn.
What he
Pop,
said exactly.
Pop is going to leave a turd in the ring as opposed to a 6-man match.
What he said exactly was, I defy anyone to read this proposed finish, which was reported here correctly, and tell me what the hell's going on. Reading this thing is like a Chinese geometry test. Imagine this finish coming after 11 p.m. on a 3-hour, 12-match show.
Of course, he also left out the fact that during the first half of the show, we were supposed to come out as a unit, the hot stuff unit, and explain the angle to the people who had not been part of the follow-up to the angle, to the 4 or 5 shows that led into this match. And we're going to explain the whole angle through a promo, which somehow got on the cutting room floor. And that would have explained to the people so the angle would have made sense. And not only would the angle have made sense, it would have worked, it would have popped the house, and it would have had them leaving on a high note instead of on the low note they left on.
Okay.
And then he says, I was not going to let Missy get hit on my show, is that what he said?
Something, I can look it up real quick. But he also made various mentions to ECW.
That was beforehand. That was in the locker room as he was going through the matches. He kept saying, we're not going to curse because we're not ECW. And we're not going to go over to railings because we're not ECW. And by the third time he said, we're not ECW, the response was, well, if you were, you'd still be in business. Because, enough was enough.
You said that?
Yeah, there's over there, one person, the only person that was directed at was me. And he can say all he wants, but he really was directed it at Paul, and he wanted to go at Paul through me. Fuck him. I'm the horse he rode in on.
Okay,
I had to go back to ECW and start using the tennis racket as a gimmick. Anyway, the point is, he said he wanted to hit a woman. No one's going to hit a woman.
Here we
on my
go.
show.
You ready? I told Tod Gordon what had been decided at our meeting earlier in the evening, which I fully supported.
A meeting, by the way, that I wasn't invited to, even though supposedly my deal is I have complete creative control over our angle. But they had a meeting about the angle without me. Go ahead.
Okay. Which he fully supported. War Games rules were fine. No eliminations.
She'll get that.
It's okay. No eliminations, as that would be a mess. Neither Dennis nor Gordon would be allowed to wrestle while a breath was left in my body for the good of the wrestling business.
Timeout.
No one was going to...
Time out.
Okay.
Timeout. We'll go through it. Now, I've seen Jim Cornette in matches, usually against women.
Baby doll?
I've seen, we'll get to the baby doll in a minute, but usually against women, wearing the shoulder pads. He only takes the one bump that he knows where he stands on the ring apron, takes the bump to his ass to the ring apron and down to the floor. He's only got one bump in his repertoire. And he's going to tell me that I would be an embarrassment? Well, I'll tell you what. I'm not Sandman or Sabu or Taz, but I've gone through tables, been in the cement floor and cracked my head. I've had my shoulder. There have been matches with Fonzie where he and I went out there and literally, I'm going to tell you, because we're not workers and don't know how to work, we went out there and beat the shit out of each other. If you don't believe it, you ask Fonzie or ask me the lumps we had on each other because we couldn't know how to throw a working punch. And we were not going to go out there and have our shit get pissed on. So we went out there.
Although it did by some.
Very few. Very few. I think some people were very complimentary to it.
Some were, absolutely.
I wish I could remember who you're referring to because I'll bury them too.
Dave Meltzer.
Oh, well, Dave Meltzer doesn't count. Dave Meltzer's a piece of shit. Anybody who reads him to this day has got to be, what a waste of money. Turn your computer on. Find a Larry. Don't give this man your money. You got to be out of your freaking minds. That's all I got to say about Dave Meltzer.
Jim Cornette.
So Jim Cornette, who sat was going to sit there and tell me I'd be embarrassed in the ring. Well, I'll tell you what. I worked matches all over the country with Fonzie. Nobody pissed on him anywhere. Not one city we were in did we hear bullshit or this side. Not one place. You know why? Because we went out there and worked our asses off. And yeah, I took the bumps. I've taken suplex. I've taken I used to go out before the matches and learn how to take the bumps. Because I wanted to know what to do out there so I wouldn't get hurt. I learned how to go through a table and still got hurt. But this guy's not going to sit there and tell me I'd be an embarrassment. Fuck you, Jim Cornette. You are an embarrassment.
Okay. From there, we'll go to what he said. No one was going to clothesline Missy or any other woman.
Right, because that would go against his style of booking. I mean, hottest angle he was ever in was in with him and Baby Doll in matches, and him and Misty Blue Sims in Smoky Mountain. Those are his two big angles of his lifetime. You know, his two big hot angles was him against the woman. But no one's ever going to hit a woman when Jim Cornette's around. And Jim Cornette's style of booking was, okay, Smoky Mountain. All right, here's what we're going to do. All you darkies, you get on this side of the room. All you whiteys, you get on this side of the room. Then we'll go out there and we'll make it blackies against whiteys and we'll get all the people all stoked up, okay? I mean, come on, man. This is 1998. Get a clue. This guy couldn't book his way out of a paper bag.
3 turns in that convoluted finish would get over like a turd in a punch bowl.
Well, there's somebody who would know because he's probably had a few turds out of punch bowls.
Since this was the NWA anniversary show that the NWA could get their hands raised, Dennis wanted to cut the angle because it hadn't drawn 15 cents in Chinese money.
And obviously he would know that because he's dipping in Dennis's pocket getting paid by almost as much as I was. But the point is, like I said, I gave him his finish, I gave him his out, I gave him his conclusion, but, you know, we have a deal. If I shake somebody's hand and I say, you have creative control, you need to call your finish. If I shake somebody's hand and I say, this is the match you're going to do, this is what you're going to get paid, even if I'm losing money, I paid those guys. The nights when I had houses where there's only 200 people and I had a payroll of 20 guys, all 20 guys got what they were promised. Every single buddy in that locker room got money that came out of my pocket that I was losing. But they got their money. But this is like, hey, fans don't mean shit. Screw the fans, they'll be tired, give them the 6-man, let's get the hell out of here. No, Jimmy, that's not the way you do it. And that's why Smoky Mountain's not in business, and that's why you're not doing squat over with Vince anymore. That's not how you run an operation. And no, Dennis, that's not what you do. You don't swerve somebody and tell them the last night, oh, by the way, tonight's your last night. Dougie's here, so don't get mad. Dougie, you might get mad. Please. You know what I'm saying? These guys, it was like the blind leading the blind. This is a convention for the NWA, for unity.
50th anniversary.
And Dennis Carluzzo and his kid are handing out little cards about other NWA members, like giving out their home phone numbers and trashing them, fighting with each other at their own convention. I mean,
I saw the card.
I mean, this is like a joke. These people are pathetic. So hey, I took my money and ran, but I wouldn't give up my principles in the process. But Jim Cornette can kiss my ass because, like I said, he didn't have a clue what he was talking about. And then he sit there and called ECW a ham and eggs something. Where's the scrambled eggs thing?
I haven't seen that. I'll dig for that while Bob.
He said, I don't blame Todd because he only knew from ECW, which was scrambled eggs or something like that. Well, I didn't see Jim Cornette putting on a pay-per-view. I didn't see Jim Cornette run all over the country. I didn't see Jim Cornette put his Smoky Mountain in Japan. I didn't see them run shows there, or in Texas, Pittsburgh, Boston, Florida. Doesn't matter. I made my point.
You made your point.
The guy tried to like be a smart ass. I just showed, all I really did was show his ass.
Todd, you talked a lot about, you know, what made ECW and the work that went into it, and I guess you had a big goal, and that was to get on pay-per-view, and you've done that. But talk about what it took to get on pay-per-view and the problems you had with Request TV canceling. There was one instant that after that happened, Bruce Mitchell in particular went on the Observer Hotline and bragged about having had a role in making the choice for.
Now imagine that. Think about that for a minute. This is a guy whose only link to the business is that someone gave him a job and allowed him to write a column as a fan, which is what he was. He's a fan. You know, he's one of you. No better than anybody watching this tape. I'm worth by the most, but certainly no better than anybody watching this tape. But he had the pen, so he got to write a column, just like anybody could write a column. He took it upon himself, or Wade, or whoever was involved in this thing, got involved in our business, and yes, they cost us half the pay-per-view universe by getting involved in something that
Calling
really was,
Panero.
there was none of their business to get involved in. Their job is to report what happens, but what they did there was they crossed the line and they made the news. They became the news. Bruce Mitchell became the news. If he wanted to become the news, he should just gotten into the business, been a manager, been a player. That's not the way to go out doing trying to screw somebody. I don't think he knew what he was actually creating when he created it. I thought he just thought he was going to come up with a great story or something. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But yeah, that hurt us a lot. I mean, we had worked our asses off. We had lost financially and tremendously trying to get to the point where finally we could be on pay-per-view. We could be a player in a big time. And for anybody to get involved in that process and talk to the people from the pay-per-view companies, I mean, it was like Dennis again. It was like him calling up to high school and sending them a tape. It's no different. It's just on a much higher scale level.
Well, it is different in the fact that Dennis was, at least in his mind, a rival of yours. When someone in our position, Bob, myself, Wade, Dave Meltzer, Bruce Mitchell, you made the point that when they go from reporting the news to making the news, that's a bad line. Now, why they called and asked if they were aware of the New Jack Eric Koulas incident is open for interpretation, but considering it happened 4 months earlier, I don't see the relevancy of why someone would make that call.
The call was made because he wanted to be the story.
I believe that.
Interesting enough, when it did happen, and he went on his hotline.
He did go on.
He went on his hotline, on the Observer hotline, and said,
almost bragged about it.
And said somebody had to do something, and took credit for it.
Oh, yes.
But that tape was
Thank you for being the moral consciousness of this nation, Bruce Mitchell. God bless you wherever you are, brother. You're the greatest.
But strangely enough, at 3 o'clock in the morning, when the thing had only been up for 3 hours, they pulled it.
Of course they pulled it. This guy was scared to death. The whole locker room was going to beat the shit out of him. We had to keep Taz and some of these guys from going up there and ripping his heart out.
And then
this guy's lucky to be alive.
I wrote the facts that I knew on RSPW, the internet, the next day, and they were met with denials. But unfortunately for Bruce Mitchell, he didn't realize that Bob had already called the hotline and taped the report.
See that?
So
and believe me, he didn't do it without Dave's permission, Dave Meltzer's permission. It's all, you know, you can say conspiracy, say whatever you want, but it was all part of that group that just was out to, you know, show us that they were better than us. And just because we were a low, you know, we were going for the low core, as you want to call it. We were going for the TNA, and we were going for the cursing, and we were going for the blood, and we were going for pushing the envelope. Well, they were going to decide what was moral and what wasn't.
Well, at that point, you were off pay-per-view, and then you had to get back on, and that took a lot of work.
That took a lot of work. It took a lot of talking. It took a lot of explaining. It took a lot of legalese. It took a lot of expense. Whenever you talk legalese, you talk of expense. So yeah, they cost us money, but they didn't get what they wanted.
So tell us about Barely Legal. What was it like? I was there, Dave was there. It was an incredibly emotional night.
It was an incredibly emotional
from your
night.
standpoint,
I never thought we'd get there. I mean, first of all, like I said, my goals kept changing. I mean, first I was happy just to be, my goal was to do a bar show once a month. Then my goal was to do maybe 2 shows a month. Then my goal was to have a TV show. Then my goal was to have a little Memphis-style territory. And all of a sudden, my goal was to be the 3rd major company. I don't know how that goal even happened. Next thing you know, it was just snowballing. And bam, there we were. You know, you pick up any Japanese magazine, you pick up there's WWF pages, WCW pages, ECW pages. And that's been happening for a couple of years. And I can't help but tip my hat and say thank you to Fumi Saito, who over there runs that baseball magazine for Japan and has been a major ECW supporter, or has gone for since day one, and he's been a friend to ECW. He's helped us tremendously.
Either Gong or Weekly Pro, I forget. I can't read that.
And he is another one of those super gentlemen in the business. And if you ever needed something from me, he'd get it like that.
Barely legal.
Barely
I'll
legal.
never forget. I show up at the building and I take my seat and I see you, and you were probably as happy as you've ever been in your life.
Yeah, my feet were. I
Outside
was
your
as
family.
nervous and as happy as I'd ever been at the same time, because we'd never done it live before. I mean, holy shit, we're going on live, and they had such, after this whole Mitchell thing, they had such restrictions. You can't use any objects in the ring that have points on them. They come to a point. They have to be rounded. You can't use this line. I mean, they gave us such restrictions to start with. They all but diluted our whole product. But we were determined to still give them a hell of a show and show them the work rate that had made ECW famous. And it is the work rate that made ECW what it was. It was the work rate, it was the creativity, but it was mostly the work rate of the athletes in the dressing room. Every one of them didn't care if there was 100 people in a Wildwood show or 1,000 people at a pay-per-view. They were going to go out there and give them the same exact show. They were going to bust their ass, they're going to go through the guardrails, they're going to bang each other as hard as they could with that chair. They were going to give the people everything they paid for. And it didn't matter how many people it was they were watching. And I respect that and I admire that. And that's what made us, like I said. So that night, sure enough, the generator explodes.
15 seconds after
the pay-per-view goes off the air. I mean, oh my God, trying to do it out of that building, which really did not have the capacity electrically or satellite-wise or any kind of capacity. Very had capacity to set your phone line up, let alone run a pay-per-view out of it. But God bless us, we did it.
15 seconds,
we
balls
spent
in
the
the
money.
ring. After the show, the fans went nuts. Thank you, ECW, everybody. How did it feel when you guys all went out after that?
Nothing but goosebumps, all the way up and down. Nothing but goosebumps.
I know Bob was. He was all over it.
It was a moment that, I'm sorry we don't have that part on tape.
Yeah.
Because.
But you know what? You got it up there.
The feeling in that building. I mean, you talk about it like a Woodstock love fest. This was a love fest. These were people who were saying it's a Sunday night and we're not going home. We're staying here. We're just saying we did it, because it wasn't like just the guys in the ring did it. They felt like the people in the ECW arena did it too.
And
they did. Right? They used to sit there and sing songs. And I mean, I'd never been in a building where fans sang a song they wrote together and had a whole section doing it. I know you were a major part of that. I mean, the point is, it was an amazing
experience. I was a major part of that.
It was the Rocky Horror Picture Show does wrestling.
They were fun times.
It was the greatest of times.
They were fun
and
times.
You can't recapture those years.
And you hear people say to me, if they would say that wasn't professional for me, or I was a shill or anything like that.
Not as professional as me sitting in the second row. You weren't professional yet. You weren't in the business.
And even if I did it right now, I'd say kiss my ass, because it was why I became a wrestling fan to begin with.
And it's why the guys in the locker room loved working that building. It's because of that crowd. It's why it's everybody's favorite building, because of that crowd. That Philadelphia crowd, or the people that came from wherever to that building, made that atmosphere. Like I said, the Rocky Horror Picture Show merges with Howard Stern, merges with ECW. It became a love fest.
And how many buildings could you have a group like my group of idiots that sat out there that turned their back on the Tully-Shane match and chanted bingo on your television, on the tape?
And how about we aired it on television?
Yeah.
We weren't afraid to air it and say, hey, look, these guys pissed on us. They were right, but they pissed on us. I didn't agree with everything, I didn't agree with everything that the fans did. I used to hate it when they would yell, you fucked up, at a guy who was out there working 45 minutes and slips off a top rope because he's dripping with sweat. And they're yelling, you fucked up.
Same man blows his knee out and they're chanting, you fucked up.
I mean, come on, guys, get a clue. I mean, it's one thing when it's, part of JT Smith's gimmick. It's funny. But,
well, that element has.
I always found that to be the only thing I did not like about the crowd, because to me that was disrespectful to the guys who were sitting out there bleeding, sweating, and literally giving them 100 times the effort they were getting from anybody out of WCW or the WWF. They weren't getting a leg drop, an elbow, and the match was over. These guys were getting hit with chairs so hard that we had more people with concussions. Our locker room after shows was like a mass unit. I mean, everybody was getting sewn up after every arena show. I mean, these people were killing themselves. You can't get that. You couldn't get that. We were a family.
Two, you have the reputation of pushing the envelope, but two events I think stand out, and I'd like to hear your comments on that. The one night with the fire, and the other time, the crucifixion situation with Sandman.
Okay. In terms of fire, we made a mistake. We were doing a lot of fire stuff up at that point. No one had done it yet. We were lighting tables on fire and putting people through tables. It was always working smoothly. Unfortunately, this particular night, one of the wrestlers, and again, I'm not going to point a finger, there was a little bit too much fluid put on the towel, and there was too big a flame. Nothing would have happened, except that unfortunately, as this angle was supposed to happen, the lights were going to be going out, and we weren't we weren't WCW. The guy in the headset to him. All this guy knew was at a certain signal, this corner of the room, I turned the lights out. If he didn't realize things gotten out of hand, we said, "Don't turn the lights out." He wouldn't have turned the lights out, but he, just did his job. He turned the lights out, and some moron came running out who worked for the Vikings, not for ECW, with one of the old Vikings extinguishers that must have been 30 years old, and started shooting it all over the damn place while the lights were out, gagging this crowd and killing. And it was an unfortunate incident. We apologized for it. We couldn't take it back, but we swore never to use fire again. In fact, to this day, we just have to let people go. We can't even fire them. We don't even use that word.
And the crucifixion angle.
I think
The
you just
crucifixion
crucified
angle-
humor right there.
The crucifixion angle was one of those overblown things. I mean, there's like two people who were offended by it, and
One of them happened to be Kurt Angle, though. That was the problem.
and we shouldn't have reacted to those two people, and instead we did, and that was a decision that at the time that I disagreed with Scotty going out of character and making the apology, and I thought that we should just move forward from there and learn that some things are offensive, even though and some things are more offensive than others, and that was to me not any kind of major incident in the history of ECW. I don't even consider that as one of our major incidents.
Well, at that point, though, was Scotty going out and breaking character. That was something that was decided to, for what reason?
It
To
was
placate
decided-
Kurt Angle, or?
It was decided intermission because not only had Kurt Angle, but there were 2 or 3 fans, or some of the boys came back from ringside, or maybe the Bob or whoever, and saying there's 2 or 3 people were really upset, they're offended, and Kurt Angle was offended, and we were trying to get Kurt to come in and become our, quote unquote shooter. He was an Olympic wrestler. We're gonna do a whole thing with Kurt and Shane, and we went, we tried to appease him, and that was a mistake, in my opinion. Scotty should never have gone out there and done that because it really wasn't that big a deal at the time.
Well, you said there were other events. What other events would you
I mean, to
consider?
me, I think the lesbian kiss in the ring is a hell of a lot heavier than a crucifixion angle. To me, stripping a girl naked from the waist up was a hell of a lot heavier than the crucifixion angle.
But again, because the apology was made on the crucifixion angle,
Right.
that one sticks out to me.
And it was made, and because, I'll tell you, I think it was Shane and 1 or 2 of the other boys came back and they were offended. And they really put the hammer to Paul and I kind of went off in a corner by ourselves and we said, here's Raven, Paul and I, who are all Jewish, and perhaps, this is going to be looked at as something other than what it was, because it certainly wasn't thought of with any religious aspect to it. It was like,
like a reverse racism.
Yeah, I mean, this was our angle. I mean, we always, Dreamer and Raven, the whole thing was always about crucifixion, and we never thought of it as anything other than part of an angle.
But you were worried that maybe they'd say, oh, because they're Jewish,
Yeah,
they're
and
trying to
say,
piss the
hey,
Christians off.
that's not something that we want people to think, because that's not what we're about. There is no race, creed, or color back here. That's why we didn't do racial angles. That's why when I hired New Jack and I hired Mustafa, I said, you can come here. We're not doing any of that racial shit you did in Smoky Mountain. That doesn't wash here.
Which, to Jack's credit, he always said he never wanted to do to begin with.
That's right, and he did.
That's what he was told to do.
And he's, so we did not want to take away from what was really going on and have it look perceived as something other than it was. So we felt, because the 3 of us were Jewish, that we should, I guess, and we didn't agree on it completely, but Scotty did the apology, we tried to appease people, and looking back, in retrospect, I wouldn't have done it.
One of the other things you get criticized a little bit for is, how far is too far in the violence. And perfect example, and this isn't probably one of the more violent things, but Tommy Dreamer gets put through 1 table, then 2 tables, then 3 tables, and then 10 tables. What's the limit, and where do you stop it before you're
realized
concerned that you're putting somebody at risk of really serious Andrew?
Tommy Dreamer's got more balls than anybody ever want to meet. I mean, Tommy Dreamer's the one who will get up there with a broken leg and work a match and go through 3 tables. I mean, whether he was a friend of mine or not is a moot point. This man's got iron balls. I've seen him work because I was part of the 6 men with him and Sandman, literally on a broken foot, with a blown out knee, barely hobbling that ring, and worked that match as best he could because he wasn't going to just take the night off. I mean, if anybody was entitled to nights off, it was Tommy Dreamer. Never took them. I mean, you got to admire this guy. We realized it. I mean, we started to say, uh-oh, now we're letting the fans not be a part of the promotion. Now they're starting to dictate to us because now they're raising the bar. 2 tables, all right, now we want 3. 3 tables, 3. So we started to get caught up in the emotion of the fans until we finally said, whoa, screech on the brakes. Someone's going to get killed. You know, we've got to screech on the brakes. So we've got to re-educate the fans. Now they're going to be pissed off because we're not going to give them that hardcore 7 matches. It got to the point where the opening match, the guys were going into the audience and hitting each other with chairs. When you do that, you've killed the main event. So we had to tell the guys in the first couple matches, do not go into the audience. Do not use the chair. Do not use the microphone. You've got to make it more important. It had gotten out of hand. Fortunately, we were intelligent enough to A, realize it, and B, do something about it. And we did. And we scaled back. And we scaled back heavily for a while. And then the Cactus Jack angle where he refused to be hardcore anymore. I mean, it was brilliant. It was all him. We wanted to turn him heel. He came up with a way to do it. Mick Foley's probably one of the most intelligent people I've ever met in my entire life in the sport of professional wrestling. One of the funniest people, one of the most intelligent. Sabu's another one. Here's a guy you never believe. He's one of the funniest sons of bitches you ever meet in your life. I could hang out with Sabu for 24 hours and do nothing but sit there and just laugh with him. He's hilarious. Van Dam, same way. But Sabu's funny. But Mick Foley, guys, I'm telling you, he's a very, very intelligent human being. One of my funniest memories of Mick Foley, and I guess there's one story I'll tell that Johnny Grunge probably wouldn't mind, because Johnny Grunge wears his stories like badges of honor. I remember my wife was with me, and we were in a hotel. I think it was the Comfort Inn down by the airport. There was a knock on my door. And Cactus had his parents in for the weekend, and his wife and baby are going to watch the shows. He said, Todd, come here a minute. I said, what's the matter? He said, come here. I go walk out in the middle of the hall and this is 11 o'clock in the morning, and here's Johnny Grunge laying dead center in the middle of the hallway with his pants around his ankles, sound asleep, snoring like a baby with 2 babes going, Meester, you okay? You okay? He was out like a light. To this day, we still laugh about it, but the best we can figure is somewhere in the middle of the night, he thought he was going into the bathroom to go to the bathroom, and he must have opened the front door and just fell down in the middle of the hallway, and it was 11 o'clock in the morning before we woke him up, and Cactus is going, you might want to wake him up and get him out of here. We're going to throw out of this hotel too. So we did, and we woke Johnny up, and it was just another one of the Johnny Grunge stories. I love Johnny Grunge, so.
Johnny, he could party a little bit.
There's great Johnny Grunge stories, but that's the only one I'm going to tell.
I don't blame you.
Well, you started the company, you made it hardcore, you made it extreme, you pushed the envelope, you changed wrestling, you got to pay-per-view, and now ECW is having trouble getting back on TV in New York. They're having trouble getting national. What do you think, observing not from within the company but from outside, what do you think needs to be done, or should something be done to tone down things so that ECW can be picked up national?
At this point is certainly no less pushing the envelope than the WWF is.
But the perception,
It's not even a perception issue anymore. It's a dollar and cents issue. If ECW had the money to buy a network like the USA Network, whether it would be TNT or whether it be Lifetime, or the money to get their own network is going to get with them and partner with them, and they had that kind of finances, they'd still be pushing the envelope and they'd be just as successful as Vince is. But if they had the USA. God bless you, USA. I wish we had USA. We're calling Sports Channel New York. How about trying it? Sports Channel Boston. We put us on Sports Channel Chicago. I mean, I used to be on the phone with every sports channel around the country just begging them to put our show on.
So what's the answer? What will it take to get national?
Well, to get a national network, what's going to take is strictly dollars and cents. Because if you had the money, you could buy an hour on CBS at 1 o'clock nationally around the country, just like Howard Stern has. If you had the money, you could buy an hour anywhere.
How about the idea that...
But it takes a lot of money.
Well, obviously now, Vince isn't paying to be on USA. He's gone into a partnership, for lack of a better word, with them. And they both benefit from his product airing on the station.
Now, why do you say Vince is not paying to be on USA?
I don't think Vince would be paying because he delivers big ratings, and out of ratings
I
comes
think you would
advertising
find
dollars.
yourself very much mistaken if you think that's the case.
Do you think Vince pays for his time?
Absolutely.
I would be shocked then to find that out.
Now, if there's a deal that's been cut recently where they are now partnered together, that I don't know about. Was Vince paying for USA? He most certainly was. And if Vince had lost USA, he was beat because he had burned all the bridges with, the Fox affiliates. And Fox is really the ones who screwed us the most. When they came in and started taking over all the sports channels and kicking us off everything, because they had one broad who was running the company going, "They said pussy on television? And they were referring to a woman's anatomy? Get them off!" I mean, it was like, that's all it took. And it's hard work to get on TV. I mean, I can get on channel 48. I can get on, there used to be when we were on this channel 61 here, we were running on Wednesday nights. All you gotta do is pay the money, you're on. I don't care, they just say, disclaimer, we have nothing to do with the show. Don't sue us, sue them, and boom, you're on TV. It's not hard to get on TV. It's hard to get on a national network. Very hard. But I'll tell you what, like I said, we've been going out of business since 1993, that's all I've ever heard. I keep saying we because to me it'll always be we, even though I'm not a part of it anymore and have no intention of ever returning to the business. But I'm wearing this shirt and I wear it with pride because it's my legacy, and I'll always be proud to be the person who started it. I'll always be proud of everybody still associated with it. And if they keep up with the same kind of, God damn it, nobody's they'll kick us, we're jumping back up. Knock us down, we'll go for another network. Knock us down, we're going to keep coming and keep coming and keep coming. And that's the attitude this company has. And that's why this company will continue to succeed. Whether we ever find a national network, I don't know. Stranger things have happened. Howard Stern's on CBS. Anything's possible.
I think it's time now. Do you have any other questions you want to bring up? I think we covered all the
Covered a
bases.
lot.
I think we're getting close to that time that might be more interesting than anything else. Little word association. I give you a
The
name.
Rorschach test too, little ink blots or anything, or just not.
And believe me, I'm afraid of what I'd find out if I did that. We're not going down that road. You and ink blots, we don't definitely need to go down that road.
Didn't you used to sing with ink blots?
No, I was an ink blot.
Okay.
Or I did blotter or something like that. I can't remember what it was. Let's start off right at the top. Vince McMahon.
Vince McMahon, brilliant guy, who finally decided that ECW was the way to go, decided to become ECW. Still has a little bit of that country mentality that doesn't quite get all of it, but he's got about 75% of it, and he's got some support people now who are, people like Austin, people like Cactus, who can feed him ideas and help him with his creativity. And Vince is ECW with millions of dollars. That's what he's become.
Shane McMahon.
No opinion.
No opinion, nothing, no. Eric Bischoff.
Eric Bischoff's an idiot. I mean, and I'm going to tell you why I say that. First conversation I ever had with Eric Bischoff was, again, Gary Juster was my segue. I wanted to get Pillman or Austin for a one-shot deal. So I called him up, and I said to him, and this goes back 45 years, and I said, "I'm Tod Gordon," and he said, "Yes, I've heard about you. Gary Juster told me about you. You're running a company out of Philadelphia." I said, "Yeah." He said, I want to know if I can get either one of, they were the Hollywood Blondes, one of these two guys as a mystery partner for my show. He said, "Well, I'll tell you what, if you ever want to run, where was Smoky Mountain out of?"
Tennessee.
He said, "Well, if you ever want to run Tennessee, I'll give you Sting against Vader," which was their big thing, "for free. Just because I hate that fucking piece of shit Jim Cornette." And I held the phone, I'm like, it's the head of a company. For all he knows, I could be Jim Cornette's best friend. I was so startled that a man in that position who's doing business now, I mean, this is not like a wrestling angle, this is a phone conversation about business. Never met me, doesn't know me, would make a comment like that. I said, this guy, I don't know how he ever made the company go where it is, because he has, but I don't know how. Because to me, that showed me a real lack of training, a lack of business sense, a lack of class, a lack of everything. And it turns out I can't stand the guy either, but that's not the point. He didn't, at the time, I didn't even know Jim Cornette. It was just somebody I used to watch on TV. And for him to make a comment like that, if you ever want to run Tennessee, I'll give you these guys for free, just because I hate that son of a bitch. I thought, it's not a good businessman. This is a guy who ought to learn to measure his worth, and this guy's going to fail, but he didn't.
Paul Heyman.
Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman is the mad scientist. Paul Heyman is a creative genius. Paul Heyman needs somebody to help him to run the business end of his business so he can focus on what he does best. And unfortunately, it's very difficult to trust someone to run your business. I don't trust someone to run mine. I don't trust someone running my jewelry store. I wouldn't trust someone running ECW when I was there. I had to be hands-on. He's the same way. It's very difficult to put your financial world in someone else's hands. So therefore, he needs to have his hand in everything. He's my friend. He's my family. I imagine 30, 40 years from now, we'll still be calling each other up and laughing about certain things and certain people in the business that we still do to this time. I mean, we used to just love to get silly together. Paul can make me laugh and I can make Paul laugh, and we just still do. I mean, there's something about each other that we just can have the ability always to make each other laugh. Paul will be my friend for life. He's a creative genius who just is in desperate need of someone coming along who he can trust, who can take over the business end of the business so that he can do what he does best.
Dennis Carluzzo.
Dennis Carluzzo is a mark. I mean, I hate to say that because I don't like that word. He's a mark for himself. He's a buffoon. He can be led down any path by anybody. He can't be trusted. He's a horrendous promoter, which is why he is where he is 6 years later. My very first meeting with Dennis Carluzzo, somebody called us up. They wanted to do a baseball card show and have a wrestling show at a hotel. The Airport Radisson, I believe it was. And they wanted ECW and WW and what was he called?
NWA?
No,
He was a WWA then, I believe.
What was he called?
Yeah, with Larry Scherer.
Yeah, whatever him and Larry were partners in.
Yeah, WWA.
Larry said he wanted nothing to do with the show because I was going to be the co-promoter with Dennis. I've never met the guy in my life. This is like Eric Bischoff. First words out of his mouth is, "Look, man, whatever you do, we got to tell Larry Scherer there was like 500 more people there that night than were actually there. So, you know," I said, "I thought he was your partner." He said, "Well, yeah, man, but I said, you want me to lie to your partner for you?" I said, "This is a relationship that'll last long." And sure enough, a year or two later, they were going. That was my very first ever meeting with him. The guy's a buffoon. I'll tell you what, he's a nice kid, though. I like his kid. I think his kid's nice. I thought his booker, Donnie Fee, was a nice kid, has a potential in this business. I feel sorry for them, but I think this guy's just a buffoon. Plain and simple.
Okay. Let's move over to the sheets for a second. Dave Meltzer.
Well, I think I pretty much covered Dave Meltzer. I think Dave Meltzer is a nasty, self-absorbed, arrogant person who thinks that he is above everybody else who is a journalist in wrestling. And oddly enough, I think Wade Keller, I think yourself, I think Bob Ryder, I think just about damn near everybody else is, I think Georgianne McPropolis on her birthday sheet is a better journalist than Dave Meltzer. And Dave Meltzer never once, not once called me to ask me about a story. Whether it was the fire, whether it was the girl being stripped, whatever it was, he never once picked up a phone and said, "I'd just like to verify this information." Don't write fact unless you're going to verify and at least have the job skills to follow up. Don't just have somebody call you up and go, "Yeah, this is what happened." It is? Okay. Well, that's not the way you do your job. That's the way he does his job. That's not the way other people in the business do their job. I respect every other journalist but Dave Meltzer.
Okay, well then I guess we can skip Wade Keller then. Every other journalist?
Well, not every other journalist. There was a guy, I can't remember his name, who this is great. There's a guy who was a fan who tattooed ECW on his arm.
Fritz Kapp is his name.
Whatever his name is. He didn't have his own business card that said Mr. ECW, but he went one step further and actually
He
tattooed
could show you his arm, right?
He actually tattooed his arm ECW. A guy's come around, hanging in the locker room with his wife, and I don't want to start any, things get ahead, but he had a wife who liked the boys. Let's just leave it that way. And some of the boys liked his wife, and we'll leave it at that. And he was a clueless guy, didn't know what was going on, and somehow or other, I don't know what the falling out came out over, but he wrote something or did something or decided to start a sheet, and he wanted to be a ringside photographer, and he wanted to be this, and he wanted to be that, and he just kept wanting to be something, and he's like, I call him a Dave Scherer wannabe.
That's a sad place to be, too.
Really, I mean, that's your goal in life. Come on, fellas, get a break. But that's what he is.
Well, his new gimmick in life is he likes to make sport of Bob Ryder and myself on his webpage.
Oh, I can't believe this guy. I guess anybody can get a webpage if he has a webpage. Because that's got to be a joke. I mean, this guy, like I said, he was just the guy who was stupid enough to tattoo ECW on his arm and then say, "I hate ECW, I'll never go back there again." Shit.
Shit.
If you imagine taking a shower every day.
Shit. Moron. Okay. How about Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine? I know you have some.
Well, Billy Apter's a friend of mine. I like Bill Apter. I mean, the magazine is what it is. I mean, you know, they don't pretend to be something they're not. They
How about their coverage of ECW?
Well, I think that it's a little ludicrous that after 6 years, they're still not calling the world champion of ECW a world champion, but a TV champion on any other TV shows is a world champion. So there's only 3 TV shows on. There's ours, there's Vince's, there's Turner's. So they have 2 world champions, but you know, for some reason they have this really hard time because calling our champion a world champion because we weren't national. Pay-per-view, I guess that's national. We're on in like, you know, I don't know, 50 million homes. I guess that sounds pretty national to me. Maybe not on one network, but damn, how much more national could you be? But I love Bill Apter. Bill Apter's a friend of mine. In fact, they even offered him the job of videotaping my daughter's bat mitzvah because he does that as a side business. I still talk to Bill. I have no problem with Pro Wrestling Illustrated in their magazines. I mean, but they are what they are. They're a work. I mean, they're, you know. I once read an interview they did with me. It was great. I wish I'd have said anything. I mean, I wish someone would have called me for that interview, but hey, I got a hell of an interview. I said, I'll take on Vince McMahon, and I'll take on Eric Bischoff, and I'll fight him in the ring. And I'm going, I said that? I said, when did they ever call me? I mean, hey, that's what the magazine is. You accept it for what it is.
I don't know if you ever heard of this other guy. There's a writer who writes for various magazines named Stately Wayne Manor. Do you know anything about him?
Stately Wayne Manor writes for a magazine out of England called Pro Slam or something.
Power
like that.
Slam.
Whatever. Went to high school with this kid. When I was doing bar shows and thinking about, and just doing taping the bar shows for sale, just when I was selling like 20 tapes, you know, just to support what little I could, rather than realizing this would eventually become my modus operandi to keep the whole thing running. I tried him out as a color commentator. He spent the entire time talking about Stately Wayne Manor, but I don't know if that's what he called himself or not. Maybe it is.
Well, did he go under his real name then? Or
no,
whatever.
The point is, I turned the tape in. I had a tape that was like an audition tape. Turned it over to the sports channel, and they said, "Okay, I'm gonna put you on the air in 2 conditions. 1, you actually have lighting where people can see who's in the ring, and 2, you get rid of those 2 announcers who are the shits."
Who was the other one?
The other one was the guy who used to be on Spectrum Wrestling, from the Spectrum.
Oh, Dick Graham?
Dick Graham.
Oh, he was terrible.
It was Dick Graham and Stately Wayne Manor. Or maybe it was Bob Smith who used to work for Pro Wrestling. I can't even remember at this point, but that's what they said. You want the show, get lights, kill the announcers. Well,
okay,
that's what I had to do. And I guess this guy's carried a grudge for all these years because he thought he was there at the beginning, which he wasn't there at the beginning. He came in about a quarter of the way through, you know, when I was already up to the point of telling him trying to do TV. So he wasn't really there from the beginning, and he held the grudge for a long time because he felt as a homeboy, you know, as a fellow Upper Darby High School graduate, you know, that I should like look out for him for the rest of his life and make him my bastard child. But I just left him a bastard and leave it at that.
Okay. Announcers, Joey Styles.
Joey Styles, best in the business. And I'm just, you know, I hate people who say Joey Styles was the only guy in the world who could announce by himself. But also now he can't do it without a color commentator. If he could do it then, he can do it now. Joey Styles is a brilliant guy. Don't kid yourself. Joey Styles knows how to get what he wants, you know, what to do, when to do it. Joey Styles could probably book if he wanted to. Joey Styles is a businessman first and foremost. He's a great guy. He came to me for his engagement ring. I sold his engagement ring. I hope he lives a happily married life forever. We had our falling out over the years when he refused to come to Philadelphia to do the TV show. We were stuck putting on
Willie Scoop Watts.
He was killing me. I was calling this guy up saying, I'm begging him. It was really Joey Styles who got us to move our TV show to New York. Because we actually moved the whole damn production just so Joey would do the show because he couldn't miss work every week like he was doing to drive down to Paoli in Philadelphia to do the show here. So Joey actually was the thing that spurred us to actually upgrade up to New York. Of course, it ended up costing me 3 times as much to run the show out of New York. Thanks, Joe. But Joey Styles is he's the best. I mean, he's a gentleman, and I'll love Joey forever.
All right, let's go from Joey Styles to Jay Sully.
Jay Sully. Jay Six-Pack Sully. I don't even know if anybody watching this tape would even remember.
But I do, and that's all I care about.
Jay Sully was a guy who was our very first announcer. And unfortunately, he had the habit of using the word big in every sentence he used. There's a big right hand and a big forearm and a big head and he's a big leg drop. And, you know, it was funny. And Paulie and I, you know, and Paulie wasn't even with me then. Eddie was still booking then. I'll never forget one of our first TV shows when we did our first title. I think we put the belt on Snooker Morocco during the TV taping. And Jay Sully made the mistake, being young and green to the business, of coming out beforehand to Paulie and Eddie and all this, going, whatever you do, because I rented this tux, you know, don't pour champagne on me. I was like saying, please guys, turn a hose on me. Because as soon as that match was over, everybody jumped out of the ring and they just destroyed this guy. But Jay is a great guy. He's still a fan of ECW. When I was there, he was still coming to the shows to watch. He had a self-depreciating sense of humor, which I always admire in somebody, because I think I have that same kind of sense of humor. If you can't laugh at yourself, then you don't have a sense of humor as far as I'm concerned. And you know, we put him in that match where we had the bathing suit contest with the 5 women and Jay, and he came out and he was a good sport about it, and I have no problem with Jay Sully.
Jim Ross.
Jim Ross came to me for a job before he went back to Vince after Vince fired him. Said, I know you got a young kid there who's doing a good job, and I'm capable of doing a lot of things, including booking. I think Jim Ross would have been happy if I'd offered him Paul's job, Styles' job, anybody's job, but he didn't realize at the time because we really weren't public with our business. I never really will go public with our business, but I already told more today than I ever told, but at that time, Paul was my partner, no one even knew it. And he was a 50% partner. So Jim Ross had known that, he wouldn't have made that phone call. Because Paul hates Jim Ross hates Paul. Personally, I got no heat with Jim Ross at all.
Tony Schiavone.
Tony Schiavone, I think, is a shitty announcer who's just cemented himself into a complacency that... I hate WCW's announcing crews. I hate the fact they sit there and put a great match on in the ring and talk about Hulk Hogan for the whole time. Or Ultimate Warrior, whatever they're trying to promote for the next pay-per-view. Talk about the damn match in the ring and then talk about that, or let them cut their promos. But for God's sakes, if you got Rey Mysterio Jr. and Juventud Guerrera in the ring, call the damn match and let the people enjoy it. Stop talking and making jokes and being jerks on the air.
I guess we're done with the WCW announcing. How about Jerry the King Lawler?
Jerry the King Lawler. No heat with Jerry the King Lawler. Jerry came in, did everything we asked him to do, was a total professional. When we went and did our spot on Raw, and I will tell you that I was not in favor of our alliance for the WWF. So therefore, every decision or every feeling I had didn't always win. Sometimes I won, sometimes I didn't, and Paul did. You know, we went back and forth. I was not in favor of the WWF angle, but Jerry Lawler was a pro all the way through. He came in, did anything we asked him to do, did any promos we asked him to do, and I have no heat with Jerry Lawler. I mean, he called me up once many years ago before he knew me, and I said, "Is this Tod Gordon?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Is this the same Tod Gordon who runs ECW?" I said, "Yes." He goes, "Did Paulie dangerously go in your ring and call me a child molester the other night?" I said, I believe he did. He said, "Well, I'm going to sue you for that." I said, "Well, I think if you're not mistaken, aren't you the guy who came to Philadelphia and grabbed the guy in the audience who was of color and said, 'Hey, Sambo, I'm going to wet your lips and stick you on a wall'?" I said, "I really don't think it'd be hard for you to go out there after saying something like that, let alone half the other stuff you said on TV, and try to make a case against Paulie dangerously because he called you a child molester because you got busted for being with a 13-year-old. I said, "You want to sue me? Sue me." And that was the end of that, and we ended up getting to know each other and it was cool. Years later.
Let's go down some of the workers. Hogan.
I've lost all respect for Hogan because I feel that he had so much impact in making the business be what it became, and then spent the rest of his years trying to make sure nobody else had that same kind of an impact, and did anything he could to keep anybody who was getting over from getting over. Whether it was as soon as the Giants started to get built up, quick, pull him with me so going to work again. Whatever it was, I just think he's only got his own interest at heart and could care less about one other person in that locker room.
Ric Flair.
Same thing.
Same exact thing.
Same exact thing. Ric Flair, I think everything Shane Douglas said was a shoot. Ric Flair was concerned about Ric Flair, and hey, God bless him, I was a Ric Flair mark. I mean, I was a Four Horsemen mark. I was out in that audience, like I said, cheering on, and I love the Horsemen. I love the whole concept of it. I love the heels too, which is the way ECW started. We're a heel promotion. The heels were the baby faces, and that's the way it worked out. I mean, but do I think that he really never passed the torch the way he should have to the younger guys.
Terry Funk.
Terry Funk. I love Terry Funk. Terry Funk's one of the few people who not a few, I shouldn't say a few, that's really not true. He's one of the people who called me when I was out of the business, retired, to just say, Toddy, how are you? Toddy, what the hell are you doing? Toddy, you're smarter than me, I can't even stand up this morning. Terry Funk, I love Terry Funk, and I'll always feel indebted to Terry Funk.
Do you have any you want to ask?
Steve Austin.
Steve Austin, Steve Austin did something I didn't like one time when he worked for us. I thought it was very inappropriate. He no-showed a show that he was in one of the main events of that show, and when I called him up and asked him why he no-showed it, he said it was a receipt to Paul because Paul had left blood in the ring from the match before. He had to deal with him to always have the ring cleaned out, and before he would ever be in the ring, so there would never be blood on the carpet when he would be in the ring. And I said, well, why didn't you say something, or let us address it that night rather than just not saying anything, getting a plane ticket and not showing up for the next show? And he said, because I felt that was the way to handle it. I said, well, I felt you're wrong. Make a long story short, obviously, he went on to much greater things. And probably is making $2, $3 million, $4 million this year. And God bless him, he's a talented son of a bitch. I mean, his Eric Bischoff impersonation was freaking hilarious. But nobody else would let him do something like that. Nobody else would let him acknowledge another company and go on TV and imitate somebody from another company. We let anybody do anything if we thought it was funny. If we liked it, we went with it. We didn't care who it pissed off. Paul and I liked it, it stuck.
Anyone else you want to ask about?
That wraps it up.
Before we go,
Okay?
anything that you want to say to the fans, your final comments, your legacy, what you want them to know?
I hope you remember me as the guy who, had a major impact on changing the scope of what you see in professional wrestling. I hope you remember me as the guy who took the chance and had the guts to, like I said, lose the money and mortgage the house and give up 2 years or 3 years of raising my children the way I raise them now and did before, so that we could change a sport that was something I loved as a child and then turned into a piece of crap. And I like to think that I was a major part of the reason why it is where it is today. The reason why people can get 7.0 ratings today and do the things they do, because they saw we were doing something that was successful. They just took it to the next level. So I hope that people remember that the computer age, and I just hope people remember that I was a factor in making what they're enjoying today there for them to enjoy. And as far as the fans, hell, they made me. I didn't make them. I mean, they made ECW. We didn't make them. And everybody, whether they started as a fan like me, or you, or anybody else, you're the backbone. I mean, you're the ones who say, we don't like this anymore. We're not buying the tapes, are coming. Or you say, we love this shit. We're going to be here every week. So, yeah, I love the fans. I love, there's no such thing as a bad fan. You can yell, you can scream, you can boo. Just don't yell, you fucked up. But you can do anything you want in that audience. You can scream out anything you want. Get rid of your hostilities, get rid of your aggression, and leave it there in the arena. Don't take it out in the streets with you. But God bless everyone. I love you all.
Thanks for buying this tape, and we'll be back with the next one next time.